Hey, I'm Mr. Ghost. If you love true horror stories, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. The stories you'll hear are shared by our audience from Reddit, and to keep their original essence, I read them exactly as they were written. Before we begin, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? Also, check the timestamps in the comments for story titles and easy navigation. Now, let's dive into the darkness. I found a strange fang in the woods, and it ruined my life. The forest was alive again with the bright dawn, yet the air was thick with an unsettling silence. I lie on the ground, the moss beneath me cold and brittle. My head pounded, each beat a relentless drum in my temples. The cry for help still echoed in my mind, though I couldn't tell if it was mine or someone else. The world around me was a blur, the towering trees swaying ominously in the morning breeze. As I struggled to sit up, the world spun, forcing me to clutch at the ground for balance. My hands were trembling, the dirt beneath my fingers a stark reminder of the night's events. The forest floor was littered with leaves, some disturbed, others untouched, each one a silent witness to the chaos that had unfolded. My memory was fragmented, like pieces of a shattered mirror reflecting distorted images. I recalled walking through the forest, the moonlight casting long shadows, each step deeper into the woods. Then, a sound, low, guttural, something primal. My heart raced as I thought of it, the fear fresh and raw. I stood, brushing off the dirt, my movements slow and deliberate. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and something metallic, blood. My stomach churned at the thought. I looked down at my hands, the memory of warmth on my skin, though they were clean now. The confusion was suffocating, each breath a struggle. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees looming above. As I stumbled forward, my thoughts drifted to Beatrice, her laughter echoing in my mind, now replaced with the haunting stillness of the forest. The weight of the unspoken truth pressed heavily on my chest, making each breath a laborious task. I took a step forward, the crunch of leaves beneath my foot breaking the silence. The path ahead was unclear, but I knew I had to move. The forest was no longer a place of wonder, but a realm of dread, each step a journey deeper into the unknown. The fear was palpable, a living entity that would not let me go. My heart quickened as I stumbled along, afraid of what I knew what I would see. I paused, hesitant to step forward, to see the truth. The familiar landmarks were now strangers in this altered reality. The forest, once a place of magic and discovery, was now a labyrinth of horrors. The cry for help echoed again, this time a call to myself, a reminder of what I had done. Then I woke up. I can still feel the weight of the dream pressing down on me again, the images still sharp in my mind. Every night since it happened I have had that dream. The forest, the fear, the overwhelming sense of dread. It all feels like it did that night. It forces me to remember, and then I remember what happened to her. I shudder involuntarily, and a new despair grips me, and I wake again into the nightmare that is my continued existence. I suppose you could call this a confession, though I'm not entirely sure. The truth about what happened in the forest needs to be told, yet I'm torn about revealing it. Beatrice, my fiancée, she was killed, but not by a wild animal as everyone thought. What took her life was far more terrifying. It all happened just a month ago, during a camping trip, when I stumbled upon that cursed fang, and this nightmare began. The drive along the Olympic Peninsula was beautiful, a tapestry of emerald and amber with sunlight filtering through the dense canopy above, casting pretty patterns on the winding road. The air was thick with the scent of pine trees and moss, a primordial aroma that filled the car as we rolled down the windows, letting the crisp air mingle with our excitement. Beatrice sat beside me, her hair dancing in the breeze, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. She hummed along to the music, her voice soft and melodic, a sound that had become as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. I glanced at her, watching as she leaned her head against the window, her gaze lost in the passing landscape. Her profile was silhouetted against the vibrant greens of the forest, and for a moment I felt a surge of love and nervousness. The small box in my pocket, containing the ring I had chosen for her, felt heavier with each mile. I had planned this trip meticulously, wanting every moment to be perfect, especially the one when I would ask her to spend the rest of her life with me. We had met a year ago in a campsite not far from here, our paths crossing in the midst of nature's splendor. She had been setting up her tent with the efficiency of someone who had done it 100 times, while I struggled with mine, my inexperience evident. Her laughter, warm and inviting, had drawn me in, and before I knew it, we were sharing stories and laughter around a campfire. Now, here we were, returning to the wilderness that had brought us together, ready to embark on a new chapter. As we turned a bend, the campsite came into view, a small clearing nestled among towering evergreens. The trees stood like sentinels, their branches swaying gently in the wind, their leaves rustling softly. The clearing was carpeted with moss, a soft emerald green that seemed to glow in the fading light of day. Beatrice gasped, her eyes lighting up with delight. "It's perfect," she whispered, her voice filled with delight. We pulled into the campsite, the gravel crunching beneath the tires. The absence of a park ranger was immediately noticeable, but I brushed it off, attributing it to the seclusion of the area. We were, after all, in a remote part of the peninsula, far from the main tourist trails. Beatrice, ever the practical one, took charge of setting up the tent while I gathered firewood, our movements efficient and practiced from years of shared adventures. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the clearing, a sense of unease began to settle over me. The forest, which had seemed so welcoming just hours before, now felt oppressive, the silence between the trees heavy and foreboding. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just my imagination, but the feeling lingered, a nagging sense that something was off. Beatrice, ever attuned to my moods, noticed my distraction.
"Hey, everything okay?" she asked,
her voice soft with concern as she placed a hand on my arm. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine, just a bit tired, I guess." She looked at me, her eyes searching, but she didn't press. Instead, she squeezed my hand gently and returned to setting up the tent. I watched her, feeling a pang of guilt for not being honest, but I didn't want to ruin the trip. Not yet. I had plans, promises to keep, and a future to build. As the darkness deepened, the forest came alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, their calls echoing through the trees. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows on the surrounding trees, making them seem to move and twist in the light. Beatrice sat close to me, her warmth a comforting presence, and I knew I had to tell her soon. But for now, I just held her hand, the ring box pressing against my leg, a reminder of the promise I was about to make. The night wore on, the stars twinkling above, and the forest holding its breath. I knew that this trip was just the beginning, a step into the unknown, where the beauty of nature could quickly turn into something more sinister. But in that moment, with Beatrice by my side, I felt a sense of peace, a sense of belonging. I had no idea then of how fragile the peace was. Worse still, that the darkness that lurked within the trees was only the beginning of the nightmare that would ruin our future. We woke up to a new day. The morning sun filtered through the dense canopy above, casting a warm glow over the campsite. The air was crisp and invigorating. Beatrice and I packed our backpacks with water, snacks, and a park map, eager to explore the trails that moved through the Olympic Peninsula. The absence of a park ranger still lingered in my mind, but I pushed it aside, determined to enjoy our time together. As we set off on the hike, the trail was everything I had imagined, serene, with the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds. Beatrice walked beside me, her boots crunching on the gravel path. She was in her element, her eyes lighting up with every new sight, every new sound. I couldn't help but steal glances at her, her hair tied back in a loose braid, her cheeks flushed from the exertion. She was beautiful, and I felt a surge of gratitude for that moment, just being there with her. The trail pushed deeper into the forest, the trees growing taller and closer together. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating intricate patterns on the ground. We walked in comfortable silence, the only sound being our footsteps and the occasional bird call. It was peaceful, the kind of peace that makes you forget the world beyond the trees. As we reached a bend in the trail, Beatrice stopped, her gaze fixed on something ahead. "Look," she whispered, pointing to a broken trail sign. It hung crookedly from a post, the wood splintered and worn. Below it, a faint trail of blood led into the underbrush. My heart quickened as I followed her gaze. The blood was dark, almost black, and it glistened in the faint light. Beatrice frowned, her brow furrowing with concern. "Do you think it's a deer?" she asked, her voice low. I nodded, though I wasn't sure. Something about it felt off, but I didn't want to alarm her. Not yet. "Probably," I said, trying to sound calm. "Let's take a look." We followed the blood trail, our steps cautious. The forest seemed to grow quieter, the trees closing in around us. The air felt heavier, thick with an almost palpable tension. Beatrice stayed close, her hand brushing against mine. As we pushed through the underbrush, we stumbled into a small clearing. What we found was nothing short of horrifying. A large deer lay on the ground, its body torn apart with brutal force. The carcass was mutilated, pieces scattered across the clearing. Deep claw marks scored the trees, too large for any local wildlife. Dark blood trails led in multiple directions, as if the deer had been dragged, then torn apart. Beatrice gasped, her hand covering her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered, her eyes wide with shock. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This wasn't the work of a typical predator. It was violent, excessive, and then I saw something strange. It appeared to be several bits of shredded cloth, like fragments of clothes. It looked like it was torn by force and not by cutting. I even caught a glimpse of something that looked like a portion of a hat, the type that park rangers often wore. All of the fragments were weathered, as if they had been there for some time. "Beatrice," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "we need to go." But before I could turn, there was a sudden movement in the bushes. I stepped back, my heart racing, and tripped over a root. I fell hard, my hand reaching out to break my fall. As I landed, I felt a sharp pain in my palm. I cried out, yanking my hand back. Beatrice was beside me in an instant, her face pale. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, though I wasn't sure. My hand throbbed, and I could feel blood welling up. Beatrice took my hand gently, examining it. "There's something stuck," she said, her voice steady now. "Let me see." She pulled out a small first aid kit from her backpack and carefully cleaned the wound. As she did, I saw it, a jagged tooth, sharp and curved, embedded in my palm. It was large, at least 3 inches long, with an opalescent sheen that caught the light. It looked ancient, yet razor-sharp. "What is this?" Beatrice muttered, her brow furrowed. "It looks like a fang." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was racing, my thoughts spiraling. Where had this come from? What kind of animal had teeth like this? Beatrice carefully pulled out the tooth, and I hissed in pain. The wound was deep, and blood flowed freely. She pressed a gauze pad to it, her hand steady. "We need to get you back to the campsite," she said. "This might need stitches." I nodded, though I knew it was more than that. Something was wrong, something I couldn't explain. As we made our way back through the forest, the trees seemed to loom over us, casting long, ominous shadows. The air felt colder now, the silence oppressive. We both considered just what could have done that, and worse if it was still in the area. Beatrice walked close, her arm around me, her warmth a comfort, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that unblinking eyes were trained on us from the darkness. The forest, once a place of beauty and peace, now felt like a trap, a place where the lines between reality and nightmare were blurring. As we emerged from the trees and saw the campsite in the distance, I felt a wave of relief, but it was short-lived. The wound in my hand throbbed, a painful reminder that we could still be in danger of whatever had left that morbid scene. We discussed our plans, and I managed to convince her to stay for another night. I reasoned that it might have been a bear or something, and that we needed to take extra precaution that night, but that it should not spoil our entire trip. She agreed, somewhat reluctantly, and I felt bad. Since I did not really believe my own rationalization, what's worse, I kept wondering why there were clothes near the butchered deer. Whatever did that couldn't have been human, but there were also no human remains. The air that night felt heavy and stifling. Even inside the tent, I couldn't shake the sense of being trapped. I knew we were just taking precautions for whatever might be out there, but I felt an even stranger sensation, like I just wanted to break out and run as fast as I could through the darkness of the forest and find something to eat. My imagination was jolted back to what was happening, and I felt the throbbing in my hand again. The wound, the jagged gash from the mysterious tooth, seemed to burn with a life of its own, but I wouldn't let it stop me. Tomorrow, by the waterfall, I would propose to Beatrice. The thought was a beacon, cutting through the haze in my mind. As night deepened, the forest outside came alive with sounds, hooting owls, rustling leaves, the distant howl that sent a shiver down my spine. Beatrice slept peacefully, her breath a soft rhythm against the stillness. I lay awake, my mind a turmoil of fear, but more disturbingly, hunger. The moon, a silver orb in the sky, called to me, its pull as undeniable as the tides it controlled. When sleep finally claimed me, it was not restful. Visions assaulted me, probing the forest, the earth beneath my paws, the thrill of the hunt. I was no longer myself, but a predator driven by instincts raw and ancient. The moon loomed, full and brilliant, its light a cold embrace. I tore through the underbrush, the forest alive with my prey's fear. The vision faded, leaving me breathless and unsettled. Morning brought no relief. The wound was worse, the flesh red and swollen, emitting a faint, unnatural odor. Beatrice noticed my discomfort and frowned, but I brushed it off, not wanting her concern. Hunger gnawed at me, sharp and insistent. I devoured our stockpile of protein, the steak, sausage, and hot dogs. I could barely wait for them to cook on the smoldering campfire. The taste was raw and satisfying, yet it did little to quell the emptiness inside. Beatrice watched me with obvious concern, and I could tell that she was worried about me. I lied and told her I was fine and that I had a surprise for our hike to the waterfall today. The hike to the waterfall was a blur of pain and resolve, each step a testament to my determination to try and make the moment special. We had arrived and were both taken aback by the natural beauty of the stunning vista. We walked toward the waterfall and watched as it cascaded, a veil of white against the rocks, its roar a symphony of nature. The time was finally right and I took Beatrice's hand. I pulled out the ring and she knew what I was doing as soon as I knelt down. She started to cry as I asked her to be mine. Her yes was a whisper, a promise, and for a moment everything else faded away. Unfortunately, the moment was fleeting. I suddenly fell victim to the worst headache I have ever had in my life. It was sharp and blinding. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't, and I almost toppled over. The world around me blurred and narrowed to a single point of agony, a searing pain that radiated from my temples to the base of my skull. I stumbled, my vision flashing with spots of light and dark, and before I could steady myself, Beatrice's hands were on my arms, her voice sharp with worry. Hey, are you okay? Oh my God, you're burning up, she said, her fingers tightening as she tried to keep me upright. I wanted to tell her I was fine, to brush it off like I had before, but the words caught in my throat, my mouth felt dry, and there was a metallic taste lingering on my tongue, like blood. She guided me to a rock near the edge of the waterfall, the cool mist from the cascading water hitting my face and doing little to ease the throbbing in my head. I sat down heavily, my breath coming in shallow gasps, and pressed my hands against my temples as if I could physically push the pain away. Patrice crouched beside me, her expression etched with concern. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a water bottle, unscrewing it with one hand. "Drink this," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "You're probably dehydrated from the hike and this fever." "I'm fine," I managed to mutter, but the words felt hollow even to me. My body felt wrong, like it was betraying me. The headache was unbearable, a relentless, pulsating ache that made every thought a struggle, and beneath it, that strange, gnawing hunger lingered, clawing at my insides like an animal trying to break free. Beatrice frowned, her eyes narrowing as she studied me. "No, you're not fine. You've been acting weird all day. First, the way you ate all that food." She hesitated, her voice softening. "And now this. What's going on with you? Is it the wound? Is it already infected?" I glanced down at my hand, the gash still raw and oozing despite the bandage. It pulsed with a strange, warm heat, and when I pressed on it, a sharp, burning pain shot up my arm. I winced, and Beatrice gasped, reaching for my hand. "Let me help," she said, her voice laced with the nurturing instinct I loved so much about her. "We should clean it again, maybe apply some more antibiotic ointment. I have some in the first aid kit. But if we need antibiotics, we are going to have to leave early. I am serious." She touched my hand, and I felt a surge of something primal and dark rise up in me, like a growl forming in my chest. I jerked my hand back, my heart pounding in my ears. For a moment, I saw fear flicker in her eyes, and I hated myself for it. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, forcing a smile that felt foreign on my lips. "I'm just tired. Yeah, maybe dehydration. Let's head back to the campsite and rest. Okay? Beatrice hesitated, her gaze lingering on me, as if searching for the truth behind my words. Then, after a moment, she nodded and stood back up. We started back for camp. The forest seemed to close in around us, the shadows twisting into forms that we watched and waited. I knew then that something was wrong. My head still throbbed, and my hand burned worse than before. But the worst part was the call, the anticipation of what was coming next. I felt a thrumming of energy in the ground beneath me that made the pain of my head abate. I closed my eyes as I stumbled along and saw the brilliant silver moon shining in the dark sky above. The call of the moon was more than just a vision. It was a warning, a harbinger of the horror that lurked within. I tried to articulate my vision to Beatrice, but I just let out an unintelligible mumble as we moved along. The night air clung to us like a damp shroud, heavy with the scent of moss and decay. The campsite was a fragile pocket of light, the fire spitting and crackling against the encroaching darkness. Beatrice knelt beside me, her hands gentle as she unwrapped the bandage around my hand. The wound pulsed with a sickly heat, the edges red and swollen, oozing a viscous fluid that gleamed in the firelight. "You need to see a doctor," Beatrice said, her voice soft but laced with urgency. She dipped a cloth into the water bottle, the liquid sloshing as she cleaned the wound. The antiseptic stung, but I bit back the hiss, not wanting to show weakness. "It's just an infection," I lied, though the pain was a relentless throb that echoed through every vein. The forest seemed to hum with it, the trees leaning in as if to listen. "We can't leave now. Not yet." Beatrice looked up, her eyes reflecting the fire's dance. "We can't stay either. This could get serious." Her voice was a gentle push, but I felt the weight of her unspoken fears. I shook my head, the movement sharp. "Tomorrow. We'll leave tomorrow. But tonight, I want to see the moon." She hesitated, the cloth hovering over my foot. The fire crackled, spitting a spark into the darkness. "Why the moon?" she asked, her tone tinged with a mixture of curiosity and concern. I couldn't explain the pull, the way the moon's call resonated deep in my bones. It was a primal urge, a hunger that gnawed at me like the emptiness I'd felt all day. "It's beautiful here. I want to share it with you." Beatrice sighed, her shoulders relaxing. "Okay, but we are leaving tomorrow. No excuses." I nodded, relief washing over me. The forest seemed to breathe with me, the trees exhaling a collective sigh. The wound throbbed, but I ignored it, focusing on the warmth of the fire and Beatrice's presence. As she rebandaged my hand, the forest grew quieter, the usual nocturnal sounds muted. The darkness beyond the fire seemed to press in, alive and watching. I felt it in my skin, a crawling sensation that made me want to move, to run through the trees until the moon was overhead. Beatrice sat back, her eyes never leaving mine. "You're sure you're okay?" she asked, her voice a whisper of doubt. I forced a smile, the gesture feeling foreign. "I'm fine. Let's just enjoy the night." The fire crackled, casting shadows that twisted and writhed like living things. Beatrice leaned against me, her warmth a comforting anchor. But even as I held her, the forest called, the moon's pull growing stronger with each passing moment. I tightened my arms around Beatrice, holding her close as the night deepened and the moon climbed higher in the sky. Tomorrow, we would leave. But that night, under the full moon, the forest would have its way. It was the worst mistake I would ever make. The moon was high in the sky, a silver sphere casting an eerie glow over our surroundings. The air was thick with mist, and the distant calls of owls echoed through the trees. Beatrice and I sat at the edge of our campsite, with the tent a dim shape behind us. The forest floor, carpeted in moss and ferns, seemed to hum with the night's energy. Beatrice leaned against me, her voice soft with concern. "Are you sure you're okay? You've gotten quiet all of a sudden." I nodded, though a shiver ran down my spine. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. The moonlight filtering through the canopy above seemed to pulse, and I felt an unfamiliar itch beneath my skin, like ants crawling through my veins. I tried to brush it off, attributing it to the strange wound on my foot, but the sensation only intensified, spreading through my body. Then the moon shone brightly, radiant and full. The pressure inside me was building, a relentless push against my ribs. My breath came in short gasps, and my vision blurred at the edges. The moon seemed to swell, its light burning brighter, hotter. Beatrice's hand found mine warm and steady. "We should go back to the tent. It's getting cold," she urged, but I couldn't move. The compulsion was sudden, a primal urge to run, to escape the confines of our campsite. I tried to resist, gripping her hand tightly, but my legs twitched, muscles coiling like springs. The forest called to me, a wild, ancient voice echoing in my mind. "I need to go," I stammered. The words barely audible. Her grip tightened. "What's wrong?" "You're scaring me," she said. My body jerked, a spasm ripping through me. I fell forward, catching myself on my hands and knees. The world spun, colors bleeding into one another. Moonlight was everywhere, blinding and suffocating. "Run," a voice growled, deep and unfamiliar. A voice that wasn't mine, yet it came from my throat. I pushed to my feet as Beatrice's cries echoed behind me. The forest swallowed me whole, darkness enveloping my senses as I ran. Trees blurred past, branches slicing at my face. Moonlight filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Each step was a pounding rhythm, driven by a hunger I couldn't name. Flashes of consciousness flickered through my mind. The earthy scent of damp soil, the sound of leaves crunching underfoot, the burn in my muscles with every stride. Primitive urges surged as a savage hunger gnawed at my belly. I was no longer in control. Something ancient and horrible had taken over. Time lost all meaning as the world narrowed to the run, the hunt, the relentless need. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. I collapsed, gasping, my body trembling under the high silver glow of the moon that now hung over a clearing, partially obscured by clouds. I lay on my back, the ground cold and damp beneath me. Blood caked my hands, and my clothes were torn and dirty. Memories came in fragments, the desperate run, the overwhelming hunger, the tearing of flesh. It wasn't until I sat up, my eyes adjusting to the dim light, that the horror hit me. A few feet away, Beatrice's body lay mutilated beyond recognition. Blood pooled around her, staining the earth. My breath caught as my mind reeled. I scrambled to my feet, staggering towards her. The wound on my hand throbbed, a constant reminder of the forest's touch.
"No," I whispered, the word breaking in my throat. "No, no, no."
I fell beside her, reaching out desperately but not quite touching, because the reality was too vast, too horrific. My body shook as I sobbed. I rocked back and forth, clutching my knees, while the forest remained silent except for my ragged breathing. The indifferent moon watched as my entire world was shattered. I lost track of how long I sat there. Time had lost all meaning. Eventually, in a haze, I staggered back to the campsite. The tent was seemingly untouched. I was lost and cannot recall how I ever got back. Now you know the truth. Somehow that fang, the wound, the moon, it changed me. I consider the old tales of werewolves and laugh in despair as I think about this living nightmare that is my fate. That fang, whatever it came from, it might be just like it worked in the stories. Apparently you did not just have to be bitten by a live one. The fangs themselves are a curse, and I am the victim. Beatrice, I will never forget you, no matter how badly I lose my mind to this curse. The new cycle is here. The full moon is imminent. It comes tonight. I leave this account of what happened as a warning. I am going to bind myself in a secure location and pray that I cannot escape and hurt anyone else. The call of the forest still echoes in my mind, a haunting reminder of what I have become. I know that the darkness will return, and next time I might not remember anything at all. I can never forgive myself, Beatrice. I am so sorry. The forest, a psychological horror. It was early June and I had set out on a camping trip, eager to explore the forest and see it for myself. The first few hours were uneventful. The forest was as beautiful as I had imagined it would be. The trees were tall and majestic, their leaves rustling gently in the breeze. The sun was shining and the birds were singing. But as the day turned to evening, the forest began to change. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The birds stopped singing, and the only sound was the crunching of leaves underfoot. The air grew colder, and a thick mist began to roll in, obscuring my vision. I should have turned back then, but my curiosity got the better of me. I pressed on, my heart pounding in my chest. The mist grew thicker, and then I heard it, the sound of a woman crying. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but as it grew louder, I realized it was the sound of someone in distress. I followed the sound, my heart racing. As I walked deeper into the forest, the mist grew thicker and the crying grew louder. And then I saw her. She was lying on the ground in a small clearing. Her clothes were torn and her face was covered in blood. She was holding her side, where a large wound was visible. As I approached her, I could see that she was terrified. Her eyes were wide open, and they were filled with fear. She was crying. I could see deep cuts on her face and arms as if she had been dragged through the forest. I reached out to her, but she flinched away from me, her cries growing louder. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was happening. I tried to speak to her, to calm her down, but she didn't respond. I could see that she was in shock. I knew I had to get her out of the forest, to get her help. I took off my jacket and wrapped it around her. As I turned to leave the clearing and get help, I saw something lurked in the forest. It was dressed in strange clothing that covered its face. It moved quickly, its long fingers reaching out towards us. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. I was frozen with fear. It was getting closer. I closed my eyes, waiting for the end, but it never came. When I opened my eyes, the figure was gone. I turned back to look at the woman, but to my surprise, she was gone. I searched for her, calling out her name, but there was no answer. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. I eventually found my way back to my tent, but it was all too strange and bizarre that I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. As I lay in my tent, trying to make sense of what had just happened, suddenly I wake up with my heart racing and my clothes drenched in sweat. I suddenly realized that it was all just a dream. I looked around my tent and everything was as it should be. The sun was shining and the birds were singing, but the memory of the dream stayed with me, fresh in my mind. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was not right. I decided my fun was now ruined, so I packed my things and left the forest as fast as I could. The experience had left me questioning my own sanity, but I knew deep down that it was just a dream, yet it felt so real that I couldn't shake off the feeling that there was something more to it. I couldn't stop thinking about the woman and in my dream. They were so vivid, so real. I couldn't help but wonder if they were trying to tell me something. But what could it be? I still don't know. There had to be a deeper meaning to the dream, a message that I was supposed to understand. The next morning, I couldn't let it go. I began researching anything and everything about the forest. I looked into local news articles and legends, but nothing seemed to connect to my dream. Then, I stumbled upon an article from 2 years ago about a tragic incident that had occurred in the forest. It was about a young woman who had gone missing while camping in the same area where I had been. Her body was never found and the case had never been solved. As I read more about the incident, I realized that the details of the article matched my dream almost exactly. The description of the woman, her clothing, and the location where she was last seen, it was all the same. I couldn't believe it. It was as if the dream had been a memory of a past event. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the implications of this discovery. Could it be that my dream was not just a dream but a manifestation of a past event? I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was meant to find this article, that the dream was trying to tell me something about the recent past. But what? I still couldn't understand. I felt a deep sadness for the woman, for the tragedy that had occurred so recently and had never been solved. The discovery only added more questions and layers to the mystery of the dream. I felt a sense of responsibility to uncover the truth, to find out what really happened to the woman just 2 years ago, but I knew it would be a difficult task. The case had been cold for 2 years and there were few leads to follow. I was determined to uncover the truth about the missing woman and the dream that had haunted me. I found out where the woman lived and decided to pay a visit to her neighborhood. I knocked on doors, asking her neighbors about her, hoping to gain insight into her life and those who were close to her. The first person I talked to was an elderly lady who lived next door to the woman. She was hesitant to talk at first, but eventually she opened up. She was such a sweet girl, the lady said, her voice filled with sadness. Always had a smile on her face, always willing to help out. I can't believe something like this could happen to her. I asked her if she knew of anyone who would want to harm the woman, but she shook her head. She didn't have any enemies that I know of. She was well liked by everyone in the neighborhood. I thanked her for her time and moved on to the next house. The next person I talked to was a young man who had lived across the street from the woman. He told me that he had been friends with her for years and that she had been like a sister to him. She was always so full of life, he said, his voice choked with emotion. I ain't believe she's gone. I still can't believe it. He told me that the woman had been an avid camper and loved to spend time in the forest. He also mentioned that she had been planning a camping trip with a group of friends just before she went missing. I asked him if he knew who her friends were and if he had any contact information for them. He declined and said he wasn't sure who they were. As I continued to talk to the woman's neighbors, I began to piece together a more complete picture of her life. I discovered that she had been a kind and generous person, with a passion for the outdoors and a love for adventure. But as I delved deeper into her past, I also discovered that she had been struggling with some personal issues and had been seeking help from a therapist. With this new information, I decided to pay a visit to the therapist. I explained my situation and asked if she could provide any insight into the woman's state of mind before her disappearance. The therapist was hesitant to reveal confidential information, but she did tell me that the woman had been dealing with some difficult emotions and had been trying to cope with them through nature and outdoor activities. I left the therapist's office with a sense of both understanding and unease. I couldn't shake off the feeling that there was something important that I was missing. The more I dug into the woman's past, the more I felt that I was on the brink of uncovering something significant. I knew that it was only a matter of time before I found the missing piece that would complete the puzzle. As I continued my investigation, I felt as if I was following a trail of clues, each one leading me closer to the truth. But as I neared the end of that trail, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. What if the truth was something that I wasn't prepared to face? After the long day of research and questioning, I felt like I needed a break. I remembered seeing a diner near the woman's neighborhood, and a burger with fries sounded like a damn good thing. I was hungry and needed a small break to reflect on the clues I had discovered so far. As I walked towards the diner, the streets were busier. The air was filled with the smell of freshly baked bread and cooking meat. I could see the diner from a distance, the neon lights of the sign flickering in the darkness. As I entered the diner, I was greeted by the sound of sizzling burgers and the chatter of patrons. The diner was small and cozy, with red vinyl booths lining the walls and a long counter running along the back. The floors were made of worn linoleum, and the windows were decorated with neon signs advertising various brands of soda and beer. The patrons of the diner were a diverse group of people, from truckers to college students, all united in their love of good food and conversation. I took a seat at the counter and ordered a burger and fries. As I waited for my food, I couldn't help but overhear the conversations around me. One man was talking about his recent hunting trip, while another was discussing the latest sports game. A group of college students were laughing and joking, their faces lit up with the excitement of youth. As I sat there, surrounded by the warmth and energy of the diner, I felt a sense of peace and normalcy. For a moment, I was able to forget about the missing woman, the unsolved case, and the dream that had consumed me for so long. But as I took a bite of my burger, the memory of the woman came flooding back. I realized that my break was over, and it was time to get back to work. I finished my meal, paid my bill, and headed back out into the night. I knew that the answers I was looking for were still out there, somewhere, and I was determined to find them. As I was leaving the diner, a waitress ran out to grab my attention. She had heard that I was investigating the woman's disappearance and asked if I was looking for Lisa. I confirmed that I was, and she seemed hesitant to talk at first. "Can we talk somewhere private?" she asked, looking around nervously, as if she was afraid of someone listening in. I suggested we take a walk, and she agreed. Her face was worried and stressed. She was dressed in a crisp white blouse, black pants, and her hair was tied back in a ponytail. Her face was pale, and her hands were shaking as she kept looking around, checking if anyone was listening. As we walked, she told me her name was Sarah, and she had been friends with Lisa. She told me that Lisa was a kind and caring person, always willing to help others. But as she spoke, I could sense that she was holding something back. "Is there something you're not telling me?" I asked, trying to keep my tone gentle. Sarah hesitated before finally confessing that Lisa had confided in her about some strange occurrences she had been experiencing in the forest. Lisa had told her about feeling like she was being watched and followed, and about finding strange symbols etched into the trees. "I didn't believe her at first," Sarah said, her voice shaking with fear. I thought she was just imagining things, but then she went missing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was connected to what she had told me. I asked her if she knew where the symbols were located, but she didn't. Sarah continued to tell me about Lisa's habits and interests. She mentioned that for several months, Lisa had been visiting the forest every day. She had become fascinated with a particular type of bird that would only be out and about during that time of year. Lisa had started a bird journal and was tracking the bird's movements and behavior. She was always so excited to show me the pictures she took and tell me about the different birds she saw, Sarah said with a hint of sadness in her voice. But as she spoke, I noticed that her demeanor was changing. She seemed more and more paranoid, constantly looking over her shoulder as if she was afraid of someone following us. Sarah hesitated before finally confessing that Lisa had started hanging out with another woman who was very weird and awkward. She had never seen the woman before, and Lisa had never mentioned her name. But Lisa had sworn that she was just sharing a hobby with a fellow bird enthusiast. But now that she's gone, I can't help but wonder if this woman had something to do with it, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. We continued walking as Sarah spoke. The night air was cool and crisp. The streets grew quiet. The only sounds were our footsteps and the distant hum of traffic. The streetlights cast a yellow glow on the pavement, and the buildings cast long shadows on the ground. Sarah's face was etched with fear and her eyes were constantly darting around, checking if anyone was following us. As we walked, I could see that the more she talked, the more paranoid and scared she became. She kept repeating how she wished she had believed Lisa's stories, how she wished she had done something to help her friend. I could see that she was holding back tears and her voice was shaking with emotion. I assured her that I would do everything in my power to find out what happened to Lisa and that any information she had would be helpful. She handed me a note with an address and a time for us to meet up the next day. Her face was worried and stressed. She gave me a hug and then she ran back inside the diner. I stood there for a moment watching her disappear into the darkness. I knew that I had a lot of work to do and the answers I was looking for were still out there, somewhere. As I started my walk back home, I thought I heard a noise nearby. I turned to look, but I couldn't see anyone. I shrugged it off as my imagination and continued on my way. I was feeling a little uneasy, but I told myself that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I finally made it back to my home, a cozy 2-story house in the suburbs. My parents were out of town at a business conference, so I had the house to myself for the summer. Finally, it's time for some much-needed sleep. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. It was nice to be back in the comfort of my own home. The next morning I walked into the kitchen, the smell of fries and my bacon burger still lingering in the air coming from my leftover box that I brought last night. Oops, I guess I should have put that in the refrigerator. I made myself a quick breakfast and sat down to watch the morning news on the kitchen TV. We're expecting clear skies with sunny weather for the rest of this week, the weatherman shouted. I was feeling relaxed and calm, enjoying the peace and quiet. But that peace and quiet was short-lived. As I was finishing my breakfast, I heard a noise outside. I froze, my heart racing as I tried to listen for it again. But there was nothing, just silence. I told myself that it was probably just the wind or a stray cat. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I got up from the table and walked to the window, trying to peer through the blinds to see if I could spot anything, but there was nothing there, just the quiet street and the empty houses. I decided to take a walk, thinking that some exercise might do me some good. I had an hour to burn before I had to meet Sarah at the library. I grabbed my Walkman and put on my headphones, hoping that some music would help to clear my head. As I walked, I couldn't help but notice how quiet the neighborhood was. The streets were empty, and the only sound was the rustling of leaves in the trees. I walked down the sidewalk, passing by rows of houses that all looked the same. The houses were all painted in different colors, but they all had the same generic design. The lawns were neatly trimmed, and the flower beds were filled with bright, colorful flowers. I turned a corner and found myself walking down a street lined with tall oak trees. The trees were so tall that they blocked out the sun, casting the street in a cool, dappled shade. I could hear the sound of birds singing in the trees, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over me. As I walked, I noticed a small park on the corner of the street. I decided to take a detour and check it out. The park was small with just a few swings and a slide, but it was surrounded by tall hedges, giving it a sense of privacy. I sat down on a swing and closed my eyes, letting the cool breeze wash over me. As I sat there, I couldn't help but feel that I was being watched. I opened my eyes and looked around, but there was no one there. I shrugged it off and got up, telling myself that it was just my imagination. I continued my walk, eventually reaching a parking lot. I was about to cross the parking lot when I saw a figure in a hoodie watching me from the corner of my eye. I turned around to get a better look, but the figure quickly turned around and walked away. It looked like a woman, but it was too far away to tell for sure. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. I felt a chill run down my spine, and I decided to leave. But as I turned around to leave, the figure was now standing about 30 feet away from me, staring straight at me. This time, the figure was too close to ignore. It was a woman, dressed in a hoodie, her face obscured by a hood. I couldn't see her face, but I felt her eyes staring straight into mine. She didn't say anything. She just stared at me for what felt like an eternity before turning around and walking away. I was frozen, my heart racing. I couldn't explain what had just happened, but I knew that I needed to get out of there. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, so I decided to call out to the figure. "Hey, do you need help?" I shouted, my voice echoing through the empty parking lot. The figure stopped walking and turned its head to stare at me. I couldn't see their face, but the way they were staring at me was creeping me out. I felt a surge of fear wash over me, and I knew that I needed to get out of there. I turned and ran as fast as I could, not looking back until I was sure I was a safe distance away. I took a long detour to the library, my mind racing with questions. I was so lost in thought that I didn't even realize how far I had walked until I looked down at my watch and saw that I had just 3 minutes to spare before my meeting with Sarah. I quickened my pace and arrived at the library, my heart pounding in my chest. The library was a grand old building with towering columns and a large clock tower. The front doors were made of heavy wood and were flanked by 2 stone lions. The inside of the library was just as impressive, with high ceilings and rows upon rows of books. The walls were lined with paintings and sculptures, and there were several comfortable reading nooks scattered throughout the room. As I walked through the library, I couldn't help but notice the people inside. There were students bent over their textbooks, old men flipping through newspapers, and mothers reading to their children. The air was filled with the sound of pages turning and hushed conversations. I made my way to the back of the library. As I walked through the library, I couldn't help but notice the number of students that were present. With summer break in full swing, I found it strange to see so many students in the library. I had also noticed a similar thing at the diner earlier, where there were a lot of students hanging out. It was odd, and it made me feel uneasy as I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was not right. It was 11 minutes after 11 a.m. and Sarah should have been here by now. I searched the library for her, but I couldn't find her anywhere. I was starting to get worried when I finally saw her sitting alone at a table in the back corner of the library. She was acting very weird. Her clothes were dirty. She seemed to be breathing heavily as if she had just been running. She was sweating profusely. Her clothes were disheveled and her hair was unkempt. I approached her, trying to hide my suspicion. "Sarah, what's wrong? You look terrible," I said, trying to sound concerned. "I'm fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her breath smelled terrible, and she had leaves in her hair. "Are you sure? You seem really upset." I pressed. "I'm just tired," she said, avoiding my gaze. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. I didn't want to push her too hard, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "I know you said you knew Lisa, but can you tell me more about her? You seem to know a lot about her," I asked her, trying to sound casual. "Why are you so obsessed with Lisa? Why does everyone like her so much? What about me? Doesn't anyone care about me?" she replied, her voice shaking. I was taken aback by her sudden outburst. "I'm not obsessed with Lisa. I just want to know what happened to her. That's all," I said, trying to calm her down. But Sarah wasn't listening. She continued to ask me why I was so interested in Lisa's disappearance and why everyone seemed to care about her so much. She seemed almost paranoid, and I couldn't help but wonder if there was something she was hiding. "Sarah, what's going on? Why are you acting like this? Do you know something about Lisa's disappearance that you're not telling me?" I asked, trying to get to the bottom of her strange behavior. But Sarah just shook her head and refused to answer any more of my questions. She quickly gathered her things and ran out of the library, leaving me standing there confused and with more questions than answers. As Sarah runs out of the library, she is clearly panicked and disoriented. She doesn't seem to be paying attention to her surroundings and doesn't notice the car speeding towards her. I try to call out to her, to warn her, but it's too late. The car plows into her at full speed, and she is thrown several feet into the air. I can hear the sound of her body hitting the pavement. It's a loud thud that echoes through my mind. She lands with a sickening crunch, her body rolling several times before coming to a stop. I am frozen in shock, unable to move or speak. The driver of the car is frantically getting out of the car, screaming and crying. People are starting to gather around, some trying to help, others just standing there in shock. I can see the blood pooling around Sarah's body, her limbs twisted at unnatural angles. I can see her chest rising and falling, but I know it's just a matter of time before she dies. I feel a wave of nausea wash over me as I realize what just happened. I feel guilty and responsible for her death. I should have stopped her. I should have done something, but it was too late. I can see the pain and fear in her eyes as she takes her last breath, and I know that she was hiding something terrible. I try to process what just happened and why, but it's too much to bear. I can shake the image of her body lying there on the road, her blood staining the pavement. I don't know what to do or where to go. I just know that I will never forget this moment, and the guilt will haunt me forever. As the woman in the car got out, I was in shock. She was wearing the same strange hooded outfit as the woman I had seen in the park earlier. Her face was obscured by a dark veil, but I could see her eyes shining through the shadows. She was clearly distressed, her hands shaking as she surveyed the damage to her car. But as our eyes met, I saw a hint of a smile on her lips, and for a brief moment it felt like she was winking at me. I was horrified. Was this some sort of twisted game? Was she somehow connected to the strange occurrences that had been happening to me? And what about Sarah? Was she just another pawn in this twisted game? My thoughts were racing as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. The driver quickly got back into her car and drove away, leaving me standing there alone and confused. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that someone or something was following me. I decided to head back home, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. I couldn't help but think back to the strange woman in the park, the hooded figure in the diner, and now the mysterious driver of the car. Was there a connection between them? Was it all just a bizarre coincidence? And what about Lisa, the woman I had been investigating? Was she really just a bird watcher, or was there something more sinister going on? Well, I had so many questions but no answers. I knew that I had to find out the truth, no matter how disturbing it may be. I was determined to uncover the mystery, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was closing in on me, and I was running out of time. I had to get to the police. As I made my way to the police station, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see the hooded figure from earlier, following me. But just as I was about to dismiss it as paranoia, I saw it. The car from the library, the one that had been parked several houses down from mine earlier, was now following me. At first I thought it was just a coincidence, but as it got closer and closer, I could see that it was definitely tailing me. My heart began to race as I quickened my pace, trying to distance myself from the car. But it only seemed to drive faster, closing the gap between us. I could see the driver now. It was the same woman who had been driving the car that hit Sarah, and just like before, she had that same eerie smile on her face. Panic set in as I realized that I had to get away from her. I darted down an alleyway, hoping to lose her in the maze of back streets. But no matter how fast I ran, or how many turns I made, the car seemed to always be just behind me. Finally, I found myself at a dead end, with the car closing in on me. I could hear the engine roaring as it got closer and closer. I knew I was about to be run over, and I closed my eyes waiting for the impact, but it never came. I opened my eyes and the car was gone. I was alone in an empty street. I was left standing there panting and sweating, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong, and that I was in grave danger. I knew I had to get to the police station and tell them everything that had happened, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, followed, and that I was in grave danger. I notice I am bleeding and a piece of glass from a headlight is stuck in my rib. My clothes are wet and I hadn't noticed before. I begin to feel lightheaded and seem to come in and out of consciousness. Finally, I woke up in the hospital with doctors and nurses surrounding me. The room is bright and sterile, with the sound of machines beeping in the background. I can see the white walls and the hospital beds lined up next to me. The doctors are all dressed in scrubs and are discussing my condition in hushed tones. I notice that my left arm is in a cast and my head is bandaged. One of the doctors notices that I am awake and comes over to me. She introduces herself as Dr. Smith and tells me that I was in a car accident and was brought to the hospital with multiple injuries. She explains that I will need to stay in the hospital for a few days to recover before I am able to go home. I try to tell them about the car chase and the woman in the park, but my voice is weak and the words are jumbled. The doctor assures me that the police are investigating the accident and that I should rest and not worry about anything else for now. I wake up to the sound of screaming and notice a commotion outside my room. I try to get up, but my body feels weak and heavy. I hear what sounds like nurses fighting off a patient who is shouting, "You ruined it. You ruined it. You ruined it." I try to make sense of what's happening, but my thoughts are still foggy. Suddenly, a nurse enters my room and tells me that everything that has happened was just in my imagination. I'm confused and try to speak, but no words come out. She explains that I am in a mental asylum and that I have been suffering from a severe case of psychosis. The woman I thought was Lisa, the car accident, the woman in the park, and all the other events that I thought had happened were all just figments of my imagination. I am shocked and try to process what I am being told, trying to come to terms with the fact that my reality was not real and that I have to start rebuilding my life. As I lay in the hospital bed, trying to piece together the events that led me here, I can't help but feel a sense of betrayal and confusion. The nurse tells me that the woman I thought was Lisa, the missing woman I had been trying to find, was actually a figment of my imagination. She explains that I have been in a rehabilitation center for several years, being treated for a severe mental illness. I can't believe what I'm hearing. It all feels like a nightmare. I ask about the commotion in the hallway, and the nurse tells me that it's Lisa, or rather the woman I thought was Lisa. She explains that this woman, who I had been imagining, is extremely unstable and dangerous. She had been the one responsible for my recent deterioration, tormenting me and contributing to my downfall. I can't believe that all this time, the person who I thought was trying to help me was actually hurting me. As I try to process this information, the nurse tells me that the woman had been caught and was being taken back to her own room. But before she could be properly restrained, she had attacked one of the nurses and escaped. The staff is currently searching for her and I am told to stay in my room for safety. I lay in my bed, feeling a mix of emotions. I am relieved to know that I am not crazy, and that the woman I thought was Lisa was never real. But at the same time, I am saddened by the fact that I have been living in this delusional world for so long. As I lay there, lost in thought, I hear a commotion outside my door. I can hear shouting and the sound of something being dragged across the floor. The door bursts open and the woman, who I thought was Lisa, stands there with a wild look in her eyes. She is covered in blood and holding a scalpel. I can see the nurse's uniform she is wearing and realize that she must have killed one of the staff. She looks at me with a twisted smirk. "You ruined it," she says. "You ruined it. You ruined it." I try to back away, but she lunges at me with the scalpel. I feel a sharp pain in my neck as Lisa continues to deliver strike after strike. I feel my vision fading as I hear a stranger yell "stop," followed by a loud boom. My ears begin ringing. Lisa goes limp. I suddenly feel what seems to be a warm mist spray my face. I try to see, but I can only make out that Lisa's eyes go cold. She falls over, and just before I pass out, I see a large hole in the center of her eyes. The room smelled of gunpowder and smoke fills the room. Something terrible is in the forest. I've always hated the forest behind my house. The dense canopy of trees blocks any sunlight from breaking through and hitting the ground, turning it into a murky abyss of roots and brush that would grab at the legs of anyone brave enough to be passing through. My bedroom window faces out towards that forest. In the mass of trees, shadows dance and form mysterious shapes in the darkness, provoking a deep sense of unease within me. At night, I could swear I have seen silhouettes of strange and bizarre creatures skulking around just past the tree line, as if they're watching me, waiting. I don't know what for. That is why I have always hated the forest behind my house. I don't go in the garden. The forest backs directly onto our land. I would feel the shadows dancing towards me, closer and closer, until it's too late to escape. My family thinks I have an overactive imagination, that the forest isn't as dark as I think, and that there is nothing lurking in there waiting for me to let my guard down so it can hurt me, or kill me, or eat me. That 19 years old is too old for this crap. I don't care. Something is out there. Something nasty. My younger brother Kyle likes to make fun of me. He's only a year younger than me, and having grown up so close in age, he knows very well how to get under my skin. Ever since I warned him about the shadows years ago, he has made fun of me for it. Last year, he tricked me into the forest and left me there when I wasn't looking. Alone and afraid, I could feel the suffocating darkness closing in on me from all around. The shadows lurking within. I could feel something brushing against my shins, almost wrapping itself around me, before my dad managed to pull me out and carry me home. I didn't know what it was that I had felt. Not at the time. It must have been slithering through the knee-high brush, invisible to anyone who wasn't looking out for it. It felt prickly against my legs and left deep scratches. Unsurprisingly, by my parents, this was chalked down to being thorns. Thorns. No, I know what I felt, and it wasn't any damn thorns. It felt warm and fleshy, like the skin of some unimaginable creature, with spines along its body. I had also briefly felt something rough and wet, which left a long scrape around my ankle that was not unlike a road rash. This was the first time that the shadows had manifested themselves physically to me. It was the moment I knew that what I had been seeing all these years wasn't some trick of the imagination, twisting the darkness and manipulating my eyes into seeing what wasn't there. After that day, the shadows were not just shadows anymore. If I looked out of my bedroom window at night, I could see the fleshy body of what I now realized was just one creature stalking through the forest in the dark, having previously taken the forms of many differently shaped shadows as the moon positioned itself at different points across the sky throughout the night. It was pale, almost humanoid in shape, but abnormally tall and very skinny. I could see its eyes bulge as its head twitched from side to side, scanning its surroundings like a starving animal hunting for prey. Its head was long, and the creature had no hair. But the mouth was the worst part. The creature's mouth wrapped right the way across the front of its face, and opened so wide it's as if its whole face was peeling open to reveal rows upon rows of short but razor-sharp teeth. But the most disgusting part of its mouth was the tongue. Its tongue was as wide as its face and twice as long. It's no wonder its mouth had to open so wide. And just when I thought things couldn't get even worse, I noticed it had begun to come closer. What used to stalk behind the tray line was now gradually further in front of it. Each night, a couple of weeks ago, I could see the top of its head stood behind my garden fence that is 7 feet tall. A few nights ago, I saw it in my garden on all fours, rooting through the trash with its tongue. I felt sick. What was I going to do? If it came any closer, it would be practically in my bedroom. Stupidly, I decided to confide in my brother. Yeah, he made fun of me, but who else could I go to? My parents were on the verge of sending me to the psych ward, and my friends laughed at me whenever I brought it up. Plus, I know that he'd seen it too. He denied it around my parents because of how they reacted to me bringing it up, but he admitted last week to seeing it in the garden at the same time I did. His idea a couple days later makes me wish I had never told him, because Kyle told me he wanted to go and hunt it down. I told him that was the stupidest damn idea he'd ever had, that we would get ourselves killed, and there was no way I was stepping foot in that forest. His excuse was that there was 2 of us, and 2 were stronger than 1. But I thought that when it's 2 teenagers against a supernatural being, we stood no chance. But of course, being the asshole that he is, my brother told my parents he was taking me out into the forest to conquer my fear once and for all. I knew that he had done it, so I couldn't back out. And just as he intended, they practically forced me to go with him, despite my protests. Yes, I know. I don't need to be told that this was really, really dumb. So, we ventured. Deeper and deeper we went into the darkness, brush and roots reaching out for us as we passed by. I had an awful sinking feeling. Once far enough away from the house, Kyle stopped me. He reached into the bag he had brought and produced a shotgun. I was stunned. Dad would kill him if he found out. But I couldn't complain about that kind of defense. In the forest, I kept hearing noises around us and seeing movements out of the corner of my eye. I tried to calm down by telling myself that it only came out at night, but I still felt as unsafe as I ever had. As dusk began to fall, I begged Kyle to turn back, and reluctantly he agreed it would be too dark to find our way back if it got too late. However, we were too late. Darkness fell faster than we could have imagined, and soon enough we were holding on to each other so we didn't get separated. There was no way we were ever going to find our way home in this. I could feel panic growing stronger inside me. I knew that it would be out, and even if we did make it home, the thing might be in our garden again. Frightening noises grew stronger the further we walked, and the more uneasy we became. I was terrified at this point. It was made worse when out of the darkness, something grabbed hold of my ankle. Judging by the noise he made, something had grabbed Kyle's too. Suddenly we were ripped apart and flung in opposite directions, into the pitch black and away from the safety of each other. I landed in a heap among a pile of leaves and sticks, and I could hear Kyle screaming in the distance. I had no idea how far we had been thrown, but he sounded farther away by the second. By now I had realized that the creature had found us, and sounded as though it was dragging Kyle along with it, wherever it was going. Adrenaline pumped through me. I hauled myself up off the ground and sprinted after the sound of my brother's distressed cries, not thinking about what I would do if I caught up to them. A shotgun blast echoed through the trees, making my ears ring. Was that him? I mean, who else could it have been? My legs were stinging from all the cuts I gained while running through the brush, but I kept going, determined to find Kyle. After a few minutes, his cries drifted too far away for me to hear anymore. I fell to my knees, defeated and terrified. I felt my way through the forest and found an opening in a tree. Sobbing, I curled up inside and hoped that I would make it to dawn. Hours later, it was even darker than when Kyle and I had been separated. I had somehow managed to fall asleep in my little tree hole, but I was awoken by a loud crunch nearby. I held my breath. Could it be Kyle? Or could it be the creature, now on the prowl looking for me, having caught and done unthinkable things to my brother? I didn't want to imagine where Kyle was right now. Tears of terror welled up in my eyes as two large white orbs slowly peered from the right and into my tree hole, looking directly at me. Shit, it was looking directly at me, and I could have sworn that a glimpse of a smile appeared across its disgusting mouth as its tongue lashed at my face. I screamed. It was like no pain I had ever felt before. Like acid-coated sandpaper, it felt as though it had taken off a chunk of my face. There was no time to assess the damage before it lashed at me again, gripping my ankle and yanking me out of the hole, dragging me through the brush. It was so fast. My already wounded face was pulled through the dirt and twigs on the forest floor, and from somewhere nearby another gunshot rang out.
What the hell? There's no way that could be Kyle, right?
The creature wasn't fazed. It continued to haul me across the ground. At some point my head crunched against a rock in the mud, and I blacked out. I don't know how long I was out. I awoke strung up in a dingy wet cave, my body aching and stinging. It reeked, although I couldn't figure out what the smell was. It was almost metallic and meaty. There was a wet sound coming from somewhere nearby which filled me with dread, and as my eyes adjusted to the light level of the cave, I saw the source of it. It was the creature. I held my breath. It was crouching over something and eating it. The sound was sickening. As I focused on it, I realized I could see a pair of legs limply slumped behind where the creature was crouched. No. I let out a small sob as I saw that the creature was crouched over my barely recognizable brother, and as I then realized what the stench in the cave was. Its head whipped around as I noticed it had heard me. When its head moved, I could see its tongue hanging out of its revolting mouth, smeared with dark red blood and chunks of flesh. And behind the tongue I then spotted the mangled mess of Kyle. It had been licking him, licking his flesh off, like a human popsicle. Kyle lay there limply, one eye open and staring towards me, indicating that he was still alive. Parts of his face were caved in, and his open eye was half bulging out, where some of the flesh around it had been licked away. As the creature turned, I could see Kyle's body, twitching and bloody. I couldn't imagine the pain he was in. I could see the dull white glint of a bone in his leg among all the exposed tendons and muscle. His clothes hung in shreds and he was caked in blood and dirt. I was so focused on Kyle, terrified of the condition he was in, that I hadn't noticed the creature slowly stalking towards me on all fours, low to the ground. I had now realized that this was the thing that had slithered past my shins in the brush last year. If my dad hadn't saved me, I would have been where Kyle is now. The creature crouched in front of me, and its tongue hung out of its revolting mouth. Blood thickly coated its tongue and chin, dribbling onto the ground, and fleshy chunks clung to its mouth, and the spines on its tongue, which I could see up close, was composed of many tiny, sharp spikes. Its eyes moved downwards to my stomach, which had been exposed as my shirt ripped when I was dragged along the ground. I realized it was now going to start licking off my flesh. The creature slowly dragged its tongue along the skin of my stomach, and I screamed in agony. I can't even describe how it felt. A smile crept across its mouth as it continued to lick, peeling off layer by layer of skin, and then flesh. The pain was so severe that I began to drift in and out of consciousness. I was just awake enough to suddenly hear a crunch from my right, just near the entrance of the cave, then an ear-piercing bang which echoed and lingered in the confined cave. Simultaneously, a warm splatter of blood hit my face and the creature let out a devilish screech, before another bang rang out and the screeching ceased. I heard a man's voice echo, "Fucking hell." I hit the floor and blacked out again. That's the last thing I remembered before waking up here, in the hospital. A large padded gauze bandage covers the rough mess of my stomach, which is still tender and stinging. I haven't seen it, and frankly I don't want to. The doctors are saying I'll need a skin graft on my face. I don't yet know what became of Kyle, or if he's even alive, but it'll be a miracle if he's able to recover from the state I saw him in. The hospital staff told me that the man I heard before passing out was a hunter who saw the creature stalking us and then dragging us through the forest. He had tried to shoot at it twice, once when it had Kyle and once when it had me. He'd been nearby when I started screaming and found us. I have my doubts about whether it's dead. All I do know is that I will be here in the hospital for quite a while. It'll be safe if it survived. I mean, I really hope so. We never should have gone into the forest. My son's imaginary friend is dead. The smell of freshly brewed coffee was strong in the air as I descended the stairs. I stretched languidly when I reached the bottom, my body still trying to wake up after a long good night's sleep. "Good morning all," I announced as I made my way into the kitchen. I gave my wife Claire a quick peck as I passed by the stove. "Dad," my son squealed, hopping out of his chair and rushing over. That now got old. Luke was 4 in a firecracker. I lifted the boy off his feet and swung him around, much to the chagrin of his mother, who was trying to get him to settle down long enough to eat his Cheerios. Noticing Claire's harried expression, I quickly dropped Luke back into his little chair to finish his breakfast. "How did you sleep, little man?" "Fine. Reggie came to see me last night." "Ah, yes. And how is fine Reginald doing these days?" I asked with mock seriousness. "His name is Reggie, Dad, not Reginald," Luke said, drawing out the last syllable as if the name Reginald was an absolutely absurd moniker. "Apologies. How is Reggie doing?" I responded, enunciating the name. My wife shot me a dark look. I knew I shouldn't encourage this new imaginary friend my son had concocted. Claire certainly did not approve, but I honestly couldn't see the harm in it. He was 4 after all. What 4-year-old hasn't had an imaginary friend? And as we had just moved into a new home in a new village, I think it's his way of coping with being in a strange place and settling in. The move to Castlewood was somewhat unexpected. My job had offered the chance of a transfer, along with a sizable promotion. It was too good of a deal to pass up. The drawback was, of course, that the abrupt change had left very little time for my child and wife to acclimate to our new surroundings. "How's okay?" Luke said. I glanced up at Luke. "Just okay." "That's too bad. What did good old Reggie have to say?" "Nothing much," Luke said, slurping milk from his spoon. Just stuff, I parroted. "Yay. He said he doesn't like you." I feigned distress. "No, Reggie, you wounded me." I tickled Luke lightly, which resulted in a round of giggles. "Well, perhaps I can meet Reggie officially at your birthday party next weekend, and he will realize I'm not such a bad guy." My son laughed brightly and responded nonchalantly. "That's silly, Dad. Reggie can't come. He's dead." I heard the spatula my wife was holding clatter onto the stove. We both locked eyes. I paused for a beat before responding. "You say Reggie is dead?" I finally asked, looking back to my son. "Sure, he's been dead for a long time," my son responded before spooning another mouthful of Cheerios into his mouth. "Mom, can I go play out in the garden now? I've finished almost a whole bowl." Claire looked slightly distracted before she nodded slightly to Luke. "Yes, but make sure to bring your bowl to the sink first." "Yes, Mom," Luke shouted, already running his half-full bowl of cereal to the sink. He dashed out into the back garden without a second look back. I stared at his retreating figure. "What do you think that was all about?" I asked my wife. "I don't know. Quite creepy, don't you think?" she responded. "Quite. I don't know how he could have concocted such a story, to be honest. Think there's something to it?" Claire shot a look of disdain my way. Are you asking me if there is a ghost haunting our house and he visits our son at night? Really, John? What? You don't believe in ghosts? Of course not. It's a load of crap. Please don't tell me you actually believe in that nonsense. I don't know, I said with a look of contemplation. I think there is a lot in the universe that we don't understand. Who's to say there's not something after death? She turned back to my eggs she was still cooking. That's ridiculous, John. Anyway, as you've said before many times, it's just a harmless imaginary friend, right? She looked back over her shoulder at me. Right, I muttered, only half listening at this point. My mind was on other matters now. I stared out the window watching Luke play in his sandbox. Maybe I should stay in Luke's room tonight. You know, check it out. Make sure there's not some weirdo sneaking into our son's room at night. Really? Don't you think that's a little overkill? What could it hurt? It's a Friday night. Mom would be happy to keep him for a sleepover. They can binge watch Paw Patrol while she gorges him on popcorn and sugar cookies. And you can get a night to relax in the tub with a glass of wine and a good book. She tried to look annoyed, but I could tell she was intrigued by the idea. This is ridiculous, you know, she says half-heartedly. Solomon, you know, a good soak in the night to yourself. Sounds pretty damn good. She rolls her eyes. I knew I'd won. Whatever, but if your mom is busy, it's off. Just as I had predicted, Mom was pleased as punch to take Luke for the night. She picked him up early that evening, and Claire and I enjoyed a lovely night of carry-out pizza and cheap wine. I sent her off to have a bubble bath, while I watched some goofy alien show on the History Channel. By 11 o'clock, I found myself getting sleepy and ready to turn in. After changing into my PJs and brushing my teeth, I announced to my wife that I was off to commune with the dead in my hokiest spooky voice. She was already in bed and engrossed in a paperback. Have fun, she muttered distractedly, blowing me a kiss. I left the warmth of our bedroom and shuffled down the hall into Luke's room. I flipped on the overhead light and looked around. The pale blue walls sported a large clown mural which stared back at me with a large toothy grin. I shuddered. Why oh why did my wife decide on a carnival theme for his new room? There was nothing creepier than a clown, hands down. I walked over to Luke's tiny bed with his striped blue comforter. My feet would hang off the end, but I would survive. I crawled into bed and shut off the lamp that was shaped like an elephant. Darkness enveloped the room save for a small nightlight in the corner shaped like a big top. The soft red light gave the clown a hellish glow. How had I not noticed how friggin' creepy this room could be at night? Turning away from the creepy-ass clown, I lay down and tried to best to slow my breathing and relax. I awoke abruptly from a deep sleep to the sound of creaking. I had a moment of confusion as I tried to recognize my unfamiliar surroundings. Right, Luke's room. I rubbed the sleep out of my eyes and looked around trying to locate the source of the noise. The closet door in the far right corner was ajar. Hadn't it been closed when I went to sleep? Luke's tiny backpack swung slightly from where it hung on the doorknob. Hello, I tentatively whispered. Is anyone there? Silence. I turned to my right and my gaze landed on the fucking clown. I really needed to talk to Claire about that. The nightlight still gave off that creepy red glow, making the room appear almost disorienting. I looked around the roof, noting the pile of stuffed animals in the corner, and the bookcase by the door. You're not Luke. My gaze whipped back over to the closet. The voice was so quiet, I couldn't even be sure I had heard it. Who's there? I whispered to the closet. Again, silence met my query. I rubbed my eyes. This was ridiculous. What was I even doing in here? I was working myself up over nothing. I was a grown-ass man sleeping in a tiny bed next to arguably the creepiest fucking clown in the universe. I threw the covers back and was about to swing my legs over the side of the bed when I heard it again. You're not Luke. I froze in place. There was no denying it this time. I had heard a voice coming from the closet. Slowly, as if I didn't really want to see, I dragged my gaze towards the dark closet in the corner. From the red glow of the nightlight, I saw a tiny, pale face. Only the top half of the face was visible. Large, dark orbs for eyes, a grayish-white forehead, and a matting of dark hair. The face stared at me from high up in the closet, like it was some obscenely tall child standing just behind the wall.
The fuck?
Who are you? I stammered. The face remained still. I realized the eyes had not yet blinked. Are you Reggie? I asked. At the sound of the name, the face abruptly disappeared and I heard a scrabbling noise come from the closet. "Where is Luke?" The voice was louder and coarser this time, with Luke's name coming out gravelly and angry from the child. "He's not here," I said, glad to hear my voice steady this time. "What do you want?" There was silence for several seconds. Finally, the voice spoke, softer this time. "Want Luke." I was shocked into silence for a few beats. "You can have Luke." I raised my voice defensively. The room suddenly grew cold and the air crackled. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Before I could say anything in response, I spotted movement at the floor of the closet. The white face was back, and I could see it more clearly from this vantage. It was the face of a child, but corrupted. This was not a child. The skin was sickly and thin. The eyes were sunken, almost desiccated. Dark circles surrounded the black eyes. The lips were pale and bloodless and were curled into a sickening grin. It was the teeth that shook me the most. They were extremely small, thin, and jagged, as if each tooth had been broken intentionally to create this horrific and serrated maw. The chin rested directly on the floor, and the face looked directly at me, with an anger such as I had never seen on the face of a child. It was a face of pure and utter rage. The face stared for a few seconds before the child creature began to move. No, not move. Slithered, with its limbs tight by its body, it slithered on its belly from the closet, all the while whispering in an increasingly sibilant voice, "Want Lukey, want Lukey." I backed up as far as I could, until I was pressed against the headboard of Luke's tiny bed while the child snaked itself forward. Soon, the head and shoulders were no longer visible. I soon lost sight of its pointed white feet as it continued to glide lithely forward. The child was under the bed. I gripped the small mattress with both hands, not knowing what to do. My heart rate was through the roof and beads of sweat had welled up on my forehead. The mattress jolted as the creature underneath grabbed onto the springs from below as if it were some deranged bat. The springs of the tiny mattress groaned from the extra weight. Slowly, I could feel the movement of the creature as it moved one hand and then the other, until I could finally see tiny jagged fingernails appear on the side of the bed. I've never understood the term paralyzed with fright. I always imagined that faced with a raging monster or axe murderer, I could easily find the willpower to get my ass in gear and move. But in this moment, the ability to move had absolutely abandoned me, and I was forced to watch in silent horror as the tiny dead hand was joined by another. I shut my eyes tight together, unwilling to have that horrible impersonation of a child burned into my retinas. And it was then that I heard, John, come back to bed. This is ridiculous." The lights clicked on, and as I finally regained the use of my muscles to turn my head and open my eyes, the visage of my wife came into view. "John, are you okay?" I stared at her for a beat before I whipped back around to the side of the bed where the hands had grasped the mattress only moments before. Nothing. I released the breath I hadn't even realized I was holding. "I'm fine," I croaked. "All fine." She looked towards where I had been staring. Not seeing anything, she continued, "Come back to bed. I can sleep without you. It gives me the creeps sleeping alone." She turned and left, her robe trailing behind her. I waited for a full minute, listening intently for any sound. All was quiet. Hesitantly, I lowered one foot and then the other to the floor. As I stood up, I fully expected to see a tiny, ragged hand reaching from below the darkness of the bed to grasp my ankle. But none came. I couldn't bring myself to look under the bed. The possibility of coming face to face with that hideous mockery of a child made me feel sick. Instead, I turned around, walked out the room, and shut the door behind me. Back in my own bedroom, with my wife sleeping peacefully beside me, I laid awake for hours, unable to get the face of the child from my mind. Unable to sleep with the fear that I would awake with those small, cold hands wrapping around my throat and that snake-like voice whispering in the darkness. I must have drifted off because the next thing I knew it was morning. Sunlight shone through the partially open blinds and birds chirped annoyingly outside the second-floor window. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes as I contemplated the prior evening. I couldn't let Luke stay in that room again. Not with that thing in there. No, I had to do something. I had to protect my son. I grabbed my laptop from where it lay gathering dust under my nightstand. The damn thing took what felt like hours to load. When I was finally able to get the dinosaur up and running, I loaded up my web browser and began my research. How to get rid of ghosts. The cursor blinked rapidly, as if mocking me. I quickly backspaced and typed DIY exorcist. Okay, that was worse. Cleansing spirits from your house. That was better. I hit enter. The results were mixed, as was to be expected. But I finally found a few websites that gave me the information I needed. A few hours later, I had a plan, and I had a name. Reginald Ward. The little shit was named Reginald after all. It appears that unbeknownst to me or my wife, our home had been the scene of the tragic death of an 8-year-old. Reginald Ward, according to what I had found online, had passed away from consumption or tuberculosis as it's more commonly referred to these days. As distressed as I was to learn that our new home was the scene of the horrific death of a child, I was even more distressed that said child was still in residence. I shuddered to think about what had befallen that child over the past decades to turn it into this thing. My wife poked her head in the doorway, startling me out of my thoughts. What are you doing? You've been in here all morning. Nothing. I hedged, slowly closing the laptop screen so as not to make her suspicious. Just looking at stuff online. Okay. She drew out the word while giving me an odd look. Yeah, she was definitely suspicious. I had to think quickly. Hey, you've seemed really stressed lately. What if I had my mom keep Luke for another few hours and you had a spa day? Her brows poked up. Seriously? I thought you said that spa days were the most useless way to spend your money. My smile was tight. It was true, I thought it was an entire waste of money. You literally got nothing out of it. But I had to get her out of the house somehow. She couldn't be here when I was performing the cleansing. Nonsense, you deserve it. Go ahead, give them a call and set it up. She couldn't help the grin that spread across her face. You don't have to twist my arm, she yelled as she turned and scurried downstairs to make the call. I stopped myself from mentally tallying how much this little outing would cost me, and focused my attention back on the task at hand. I felt like I had a pretty good idea of how to get rid of Reggie. From what I read online, it was better to do the cleansing at night, but I didn't have that sort of time. I had to deal with this now. I made the quick call to my mom to see if she could keep Luke until that evening. After coordinating the time that she would drop him off, I quickly dressed and hurried downstairs. Babe, I've got to run a few errands. They'll be back in a bit. Okay. I'm headed to the spa in a half hour. They had a cancellation for a deluxe package at the last minute. Isn't that great? I mentally groaned, but pasted a smile on my tense face. That's great, honey. Have fun. I grabbed my keys and hurried out to my car. 45 minutes later, I walked back into the house, carrying my assorted purchases. Claire's car was gone, so I didn't bother calling out for her. I was all alone. Well, not alone exactly. I carried my purchases upstairs and opened the door to Luke's room. The red curtains were drawn and the room seemed just as creepy as the night before. The day had turned rainy and dreary, so what little light came through the curtains gave the room that same dim glow as the previous night. I shuddered. Shutting the door, I emptied the bag of items on the floor. I paused to take stock of my haul. A small wrapped bundle of sticks I was told was called a sage smudging wand, an abalone shell, a large feather, a container of coarse salt, and a Bible. I pulled up my phone and found the article I had been referencing earlier. I quickly reread the instructions through just to be sure I had everything correct. I first grabbed the salt and sprinkled a line across the bedroom door. This was supposedly to prevent the spirit from going into another part of house during the cleansing. I didn't know if this would do shit, but I wasn't taking any chances. Next, I placed the abalone shell on top of the Bible. The Bible wasn't specifically in the instructions, but figured it certainly couldn't hurt. Again, I was taking no chances. I walked over to the window and pulled back the red curtain. The rain was really coming down now. I opened the window slightly. The purpose of this, I had learned during my hurried research, was to give the spirit a pathway to leave the house. I didn't want to get rainwater all over my son's bedroom floor, so I only opened it a smidge. That should hopefully be enough. I pulled out a small lighter from my pocket and flicked it on. The small flame wavered in the semi-darkness of the small room. I picked up the smudge wand and lit the end. Red embers glowed as the stick caught fire. I quickly blew the open flame out, but the end of the smudge wand continued to slowly smolder, the red embers causing a fragrant earthly smoke to emit from the end. I quickly dropped the smoldering stick into the abalone shell and picked it up along with the Bible. With my other hand, I grabbed the large feather. I was ready. I began to circle the room. With each step, I would use the feather to waft the smoke, blanketing the room in that thick, earthy smell. I continued to circle the room twice more, keeping silent as I wafted the smoke permeating the room. After 3 rounds, I spoke. Reggie Ward, I command you in the name of God to leave this place. You are not welcome here, and you must leave. I paused momentarily in my path. Nothing happened. I continued again. Reggie Ward, I command you in the name of God to leave this place. You are not welcome here and you must leave. Still nothing. I started walking again. Reggie Ward, in the name of God, I command you to leave. At first I thought there had still been no change. Slowly, I began to realize that there had in fact been a shift. I could no longer hear the rain. It was as if a thick layer of cotton had encased the room. The air was heavy and dense. I almost had the feeling of being underwater. I could hear my heartbeat increase. Reggie, in the name of God, I command you to leave. On the word leave, I heard a thump from the closet. I paused in my pacing and stared over at closet. The door was slightly ajar. Thick darkness enveloped the inside of the small closet. Without removing my eyes from the door, I started again. Reggie, I command you in the name of God to leave this place. Another thump, and then, so low I could barely hear it, a hissing sound. Not breath whistling from between clenched teeth. A deep, long scratching shortly joined the hissing. Reggie, I command you in the name of God to leave. You are not welcome here. The hissing became louder, and from the depths of the dark closet a small, moaning voice. Don't you? The word was dragged out in a hissing rasp. Reggie, you must leave now, I yelled towards the closet. Don't? The hissing, breathy rasp was louder this time. From the darkness of the closet, those 2 horrible small grey hands emerged and clasped onto the doorframe. John. The sound of my name in that sibilant tongue literally made my skin crawl. John. Don't.
I did not comply.
Reggie Ward, in the name of God, I command you to flee this house. The top of the small grey face joined the hands. The dark eyes had a wary look. I could have almost felt sorry for the creature, but I did not. Quieter this time, I again spoke. Reggie, you must leave. Wisps of smoke began to emerge from the small hands, as if there was some great internal flame churning just beneath the skin. The entity did not appear to be able to speak any longer. Only that ragged, shrill hiss filled the air. I watched with trepidation as the hands fell abruptly to the ground. I could see the sharp nails gouging crescents into the wood floors as it laboriously began to drag its body forward out of the darkness of the closet. In the light of the storm, and in its weakened state, the creature was pitiful. Gray, mottled skin rippled as the smoke drifted almost casually from its surface. The thing lifted its large black eyes to me in supplication. With great effort, it spoke. Don't. I did not have a chance to respond. The smoke enveloped the creature. It swept silently through the opened window. I stood still for several seconds before my knees finally gave out. I had not even realized the toll the process had taken on me, until this very moment. I wiped a thin layer of perspiration from my brow as I looked towards the empty closet. It was over. Later that evening, my wife and I sat on the couch, each nursing a glass of white wine. I had not said much after she got home, and she, relaxed and zenned out after her day of pampering, had not pressed. I had not fully processed all that had happened within the last 24 hours. Honestly, I wasn't sure I would ever process it. But to know my son was now safe was solace enough for me. I took a large swig of the sweet wine and leaned back into the soft sofa. The doorbell rang, and before I could even set down my glass, the hurried footfalls of my son rushing through the front hallway reached my ears. Dad, Mom. Luke rushed into the living room and launched himself at us. Chuckling, we hugged the rambunctious boy as he told us all about his adventures at Grandma's. He was talking so fast I could only make out every third word. From what I could tell, they had had a boatload of fun making cookies, playing games, and eating lots and lots of junk food. My mom entered the room at a more sedate pace. Sheesh, Luke, let them breathe, bud, she intoned. I'm going to go see Reggie. I can't wait to tell him about the new puzzle Grandma got me. Before I could say anything, he was already bounding up the stairs and giggling with excitement. My mom shook her head. He could not stop talking about his friend Reggie all weekend. She sat down on the edge of the chair next to the couch where Claire and I still lounged. Well, I have a feeling we won't need to worry about Reggie anymore, I said. My wife gave me a sideways curious glance, but I ignored it. It was the strangest thing though. My mother continued without acknowledging my statement. When I asked him about Reggie, he said he was dead. I know, said Claire. Rather creepy, isn't it? Yes, my mother agreed. I thought so as well. But he said that he was his friend, and that Reggie protected him from the others. My gaze shot to my mom. What did you say? Yeah, it kind of creeped me out too, she said. He said that the others that lived in the attic were mean and tried to come down and hurt Luke. He said that Reggie wouldn't let them, that he protected him and kept him safe. When I tried to press him on it, he clammed up. A cold chill swept over my body. The others? Suddenly the rasping voice of Reggie came back to me. Want Luke. Want Luke. It was as if the floodgates opened in that moment and I fully understood. Reggie didn't want Luke. He was trying to tell me that they wanted Luke. The others wanted Luke. Reggie had been trying to warn me. He had tried to scare me into leaving. He had tried to help me, to protect my son. I quickly set down my wine glass and snatched the blanket off my legs. Before I could stand fully up, the sound of my son's screams met my ears. I'm a park ranger at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. What we discovered there still haunts me. As the first light of dawn touches the rugged landscape of Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, I stand among my fellow rangers, the chill of the morning mingling with a sense of anticipation. My name's Koa. I am a park ranger who's walked these trails and climbed these ridges more times than I can count. Today though, the familiar terrain feels different, shadowed with uncertainty. Hey Koa, you alright bruh? A voice asks, pulling me back to the present. I turn to see Lailani, a fellow ranger and my best friend since we were knee-high grasshopper. Lana's always been the kind of person who lights up a room, or in this case the dense forest of the national park. Her hair, a cascade of dark brown curls, is pulled back into a practical ponytail. Her almost jet black eyes, sharp and alert, missing nothing, scan me for any sign of distress. I nod, forcing a half smile. Yeah, you know me, sister. I'm solid. Just got a feeling, you know? My gaze drifts over the expanse of the park, the volcanic land that's part of my soul. Lani leans in, her voice lowering to a whisper. I feel it too. Something's off today. You ever get one feeling when something not right? I ask. Yeah. This morning as I wake up I see. Her voice trails off as she glances around, ensuring no one else is within earshot. She leans in so close I can hear the breath of her whisper. I saw something weird by the old lava flow. Like shadows moving. Not normal. Before she can elaborate, Captain Corsero, a robust figure with years of experience etched into his weathered face, calls the team to attention. His gruff voice cuts through the morning chill. Standing tall and imposing, he gathers us in a semicircle. Listen up, everybody, he begins, his gravelly voice carrying through the crisp morning air. Last night, the Geological Survey detected unusual volcanic activities on Kilauea. Increased seismic activity and gas emissions suggest that something's brewing beneath the surface. A collective murmur of concern ripples through the group. Mount Kilauea, one of the most active volcanoes on Earth, is a sleeping giant that we respect and fear in equal measure. Looks like Pele is stirring, Lani mutters, referring to the Hawaiian goddess of volcanoes and fire. Her tone is one of reverence mixed with caution. There's more, the team leader continues. We've got a missing persons report. A family of Hells. A woman named Sarah Jenkins and her 2 young boys, Tyler and Ethan, went for a hike yesterday near the chain of craters road and haven't returned. Lani and I exchange glances. The chain of craters road area is vast and can be treacherous even for seasoned professionals, let alone tourists from the mainland. It's our job to locate them, Corsero says. Well split into teams to cover more ground. He unfolds a map, pointing to various locations. We all huddle around to study the map. Sito, he calls out, his eyes fixed on me. You're with Lemons. He shifts his gaze to Lani. Start at the Kalapana Trail and work your way north. Keep your radios on and report anything out of the ordinary. As Corsero's orders sink in, a flurry of activity erupts among the rangers. The normally serene morning at the park transforms into a hive of focused urgency. Each ranger, aware of the gravity of the situation, springs into action. I turn to gather my equipment. As a seasoned tracker, my backpack is filled with essentials: a GPS, a detailed map of the national park, high-powered binoculars, and various other tools for navigating and surviving in rugged terrain. Beside me, Lani, a trained EMT, is equally focused. Her bag is a compact but comprehensive kit, designed for rapid response. She checks each item: bandages, antiseptics, splints, and emergency medications. As I strap my boots tightly, ensuring they are fit for the rough terrain, I glance at Lani. She catches my eye, offering a nod of solidarity. "What do you think, Kerr?" she asks quietly, her voice tinged with the unspoken worry we all feel. "You reckon we'll find them?" I pause, adjusting the strap of my pack. In moments like these, it's not just about what you say, but how you say it. Confidence can be as contagious as fear in these situations. "You forget who you're talking to," I say with a half smirk, trying to lighten the mood. "I'm the best tracker on the Big Island. If they're out there, we'll find them." She gives a small laugh, the tension in her shoulders easing ever so slightly. "That's what I like to hear. Let's bring them home." It's dark. The early morning light filters through the dense canopy as we load the Land Rover, casting a soft glow on the rugged terrain of the park. The engine roars to life, and we head towards the search area. As I navigate the familiar route towards the Kalapana Trail, the connection I feel to this land pulsates through me. This place, with its rugged beauty and untamed wilderness, has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. It's more than just a job. It's a calling, a deep-rooted bond with the land that nurtures and challenges me in equal measure. Lani, sitting beside me, is lost in her own thoughts, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery. Growing up, we spent countless summers exploring the hidden corners of this paradise, from diving into the crystal-clear waters of hidden coves to racing each other up the ancient lava trails. The closer we get the base of Kilauea, the more evident the signs of recent volcanic activity become. Thin wisps of steam rise from cracks in the ground, a stark reminder of the raw power beneath our feet. "Look at that," Lani murmurs, her eyes fixed on a newly formed fissure, its edges blackened and sharp. The earth here seems alive, breathing and shifting with a life of its own. The beauty of it is both mesmerizing and unsettling. I pull the vehicle over, and we step out cautiously, scanning the area. The ground feels unusually warm under our boots. "This wasn't here last week," I note, my voice low. The fresh lava flow, now solidified, creates an eerie, undulating terrain that stretches towards the horizon. We proceed with increased vigilance, knowing that the volcanic activity could pose a hazard, not just to the missing family but also to us. Paths that were safe yesterday might not be today. As Lani and I navigate the treacherous landscape, our eyes scour every inch of the terrain, searching for any clue that might lead us to the missing family. The silence is heavy, broken only by the occasional crackle of our radios and the distant rumble of the volcano. Suddenly, I spot something unusual in the distance. It's a small, dark object, partially obscured by the rough, newly solidified lava. "Over there," I gesture to Lani, pointing towards the object. Reaching the spot, a chill runs down my spine. It's a camera, half buried in the hardened lava. The lens is melted, warped by the intense heat, but the body of the camera is mostly intact. It's chilling evidence that the family we're looking for might have been caught in the lava flow. Moving cautiously over the rough terrain, we soon come across more signs of the family's presence. A torn piece of a map flutters against a jagged rock, and a water bottle, its label partially melted, lies discarded nearby. Lani kneels down, her hands carefully sifting through the ash and debris. The somber mood intensifies as she uncovers a small backpack, partially buried and singed at the edges. It's a vivid red against the monochrome landscape of black and gray. My heart sinks a bit more with each brush of her hand, revealing the harsh reality of our mission. She looks up at me, her eyes reflecting sorrow. "It's one of the kids' backpacks," she says quietly, holding it up. The name Ethan is embroidered in bold letters on the back. I crouch beside Lani, examining the backpack. Inside, there are remnants of a child's adventure. A crumpled map of the park, a small toy car, and a half-eaten snack bar. Everything is coated with a thin layer of ash. The weight of our discovery settles heavily on us. As Lani gently sets the backpack aside, we continue our search around the area. The silence between us speaks volumes, each of us grappling with the potential outcomes of our mission. Lani carefully logs the coordinates of our discovery on the GPS. She then radios back to base, her voice steady but tinged with the gravity of our find. "Base, this is Ranger Lennox. We've found some items belonging to the missing family near a new lava flow. We're going to continue searching the area." As she communicates with the base, I can shake a gut feeling that there's more to this. I decide to extend our search perimeter. The landscape around us is treacherous, a labyrinth of hardened lava and jagged rocks. Despite the weight of what we've already discovered, something urges me on. It's just a hunch, but hunches have always served me well in the past. The air is thick with the heat emanating from the ground, and the smell of sulfur hangs heavily around us. It's a surreal landscape, one that's both beautiful and brutal in its raw, natural power. Then, I see something that stops me in my tracks. There, in the middle of a large expanse of cooled lava, are footprints. Not just any footprints, but what appears to be a set of bare human footprints. These impressions in the hard, black surface look as if they were made when the lava was still molten, an impossibility for any living being to survive. I crouch down for a closer look, trying to make sense of what I'm seeing. The footprints are unmistakably human, each toe defined, the arch of a foot clearly visible. They lead away from the area where we found the camera and the backpack, weaving through the rough terrain. "Lani." I call out, my voice barely above a whisper, not wanting to believe what I'm seeing. She finishes her transmission and hurries over, her expression turning to one of disbelief as she takes in the sight. "How is this even possible?" she murmurs, echoing my thoughts. I gingerly follow the tracks. The trail of footprints leads us further away from the barren lava field, towards a region where the volcanic devastation blends back into the lush greenery of the park. The footprints become less distinct on the softer ground, but we continue, guided by broken twigs and disturbed earth. Lani and I push forward, our senses heightened. The forest around us is alive with the sounds of nature, but to our trained ears, it's what's not heard that speaks louder. The usual chatter of birds and rustle of small creatures seems muted, as if the forest itself is holding its breath. Then, through the dense undergrowth, I catch a glimpse of something unusual. It's a figure, humanoid in shape, but its movements are odd, almost erratic. The figure is covered in what looks like volcanic ash, giving it an eerie, ghost-like appearance. I instinctively reach out, gently touching Lani's arm to draw her attention. My gesture is subtle, a silent communication perfected over years of working together in these unpredictable environments. We both freeze, our bodies tensing as we observe the figure through the thick foliage. Lani's eyes meet mine, a mixture of confusion and caution reflected in her gaze. With a slight nod, we agree to approach carefully, mindful of the potential risks. The figure moves with an uncanny grace, almost floating across the forest floor. Its movements are fluid yet disjointed, creating an unreal image against the backdrop of the verdant forest. As we inch closer, the air around us grows noticeably hotter, a stifling heat that seems to radiate from the figure itself. The ground beneath its feet is scorched, leaving a trail of smoldering embers and blackened earth in its wake. The underbrush, parched from the recent dry weather conditions, catches fire at the slightest touch of the entity's burning footsteps. The intensity of the heat emanating from the figure is like nothing I've ever experienced. It's as if the very essence of the volcano's core is encapsulated within this being. The dry underbrush ignites with alarming speed, the flames spreading rapidly through the dense vegetation. Lani and I exchange a look of alarm, realizing the danger we're in. The fire, spurred on by the hot, dry winds, quickly becomes a roaring blaze, consuming everything in its path. The forest around us transforms into a fiery hellscape within moments. The heat is suffocating, the air thick with smoke and the crackling of flames. Lani and I are forced to retreat, but the fire spreads with terrifying speed, cutting off our usual paths. Every direction seems to lead further into an inferno. We scramble over the rough terrain, the heat so intense it feels like our lungs are burning with each breath. We're both seasoned rangers, but this is beyond anything we've ever faced. I grab Lani's arm, pulling her away from a falling, flaming branch. We're running blind through the smoke, relying on instinct and our deep knowledge of the park's landscape. The visibility is near zero, the air a swirling mass of embers and ash. We stumble upon a narrow ravine, the only viable path away from the flames. The ground is uneven, treacherous with loose rocks and steep drops. We navigate it as quickly as we can, but it's like moving through molasses. Lani coughs violently, her face smeared with soot. I can see the fear in her eyes, a mirror of my own terror. Keep moving, I shout, more to convince myself than her. The heat is relentless, an oppressive force that seems to press down on us from all sides. I can feel my skin burning, the heat searing through my clothes. My throat is parched, each breath a scorching gulp of hot air. Suddenly, a loud crack resonates through the air, and a tree collapses mere feet in front of us, blocking our path. The flames leap higher, fed by the fresh fuel. I frantically look for a way around, but the fire is closing in. In a desperate move, I lead us down a steep embankment, sliding and tumbling over rocks and debris. Lainey follows without hesitation, trusting my lead. We land hard at the bottom, but there's no time to recover. We have to keep moving. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, we emerge from the smoke and flames, gasping for air. The world outside the fire zone seems eerily calm, as though unaware of the chaos we just escaped. We stumble back to our Land Rover, the vehicle a welcoming sight amidst the devastation. Climbing in, I start the engine, and we drive away from the inferno, putting distance between us and the haunting image of the fiery figure and the blazing forest. Lainey, still coughing from the smoke inhalation, manages to grab the radio and report back to base. Her voice is hoarse but urgent as she relays the situation. Mice, this is Lennox. We've got a wildfire situation. The area around the Calipana Trail is engulfed. We need immediate backup and fire containment units. The radio crackles to life and Captain Corsero's voice comes through, tense and authoritative. Copy that, Lennox. We're mobilizing units now. Get to safety and stand by for further instructions. As I navigate the Land Rover through the park's winding paths, my mind races with thoughts of the figure we encountered. I glance over at Lani. She's deep in thought, her eyes distant. What was that thing? I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. The image of the fiery figure, moving through the forest with an otherworldly grace, is seared into my mind. She doesn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the passing landscape. Finally, she turns to me, her expression serious. I think it was a lava walker, she said. Lava walker? I repeat, unfamiliar with the term. The term sounds like something out of a myth or a horror story. Yeah, I just made it up, Lani admits, a slight shrug in her words. It's like a skinwalker, but for volcanoes. Seriously, Lani? I can't help but let out a skeptical laugh. Lani gives me a look, one that's both challenging and serious. Okay, wise guy, you come up with a better explanation. What else could it have been? I open my mouth to retort, but the words falter on my lips. I don't know, I finally confess, the words tasting like defeat. The more I think about it, the more I realize that there are things in this world that defy conventional understanding. As we approach the rendezvous point, the distant wail of sirens grows louder, slicing through the tense silence inside the vehicle. The sight that greets us is a flurry of activity. Fire containment units, park rangers, and emergency vehicles converge at the edge of the expanding wildfire. Captain Corsero stands in the midst of it all, a commanding presence as he directs the operations. His face is set in grim determination. As we pull up, he turns, spotting us immediately. His expression softens for a moment with relief at seeing us safe, before returning to its previous intensity.
You two all right?
He asks, eyeing our soot-covered faces and singed clothing. We're okay, Captain, Lani responds, her voice hoarse but steady. But we've got a serious situation. That fire is spreading fast, and there's something unusual about it. Unusual? He asks. I nod in agreement, still catching my breath. We saw something in the forest, sir. It's hard to explain, but it seemed to be causing the fire, moving through the trees like it was part of the flames. Corsero's brow furrows, a skeptical look crossing his face. Sounds like heat exhaustion, Saito. We need clear heads here. He gestures towards the medical tent. Head over to the medics. Get yourselves checked out. If you're fit, I need you back on the line. This fire's not going to control itself, and we need all hands on deck. So, after a brief rest and rehydration, we don our firefighting gear, feeling the weight of responsibility on our shoulders. The afternoon sky is aglow with the raging fire, casting an eerie light over the park. We join a small team of rangers and firefighters, ready to venture into the heart of the wildfire. Helicopters and drones overhead coordinate our movement, but the journey is perilous. The air is thick with smoke, reducing visibility to mere feet. The heat is stifling, like walking through an open furnace. Embers whirl around us, carried by the hot winds, threatening to ignite anything remotely flammable. Suddenly, without warning, a massive flare-up erupts. A wall of fire explodes from the underbrush, fueled by a pocket of trapped gas. The force of the blaze is like a physical blow, knocking me off my feet. In the chaos, I'm separated from the rest of the team. I shout Lani's name, but my voice is lost in the cacophony of crackling flames and collapsing trees. Panic sets in as I realize I'm alone. The heat is so intense it feels like my skin is blistering through my protective gear. My breathing is the only sound that pierces the relentless roar of the flames. Each inhale and exhale echoes through my oxygen mask. The world around me is a terrifying landscape of fire and smoke. Trees, once towering and majestic, are now monstrous torches, their branches reaching out like fiery claws. I stumble over a fallen log, the wood crumbling under my weight, embers scattering like fiery rain. My heart pounds in my chest, a rapid drumbeat echoing the chaos around me. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I spot a figure moving through the flames. For a moment I think it's Lani, but as it comes closer, I realize it's something else entirely. The figure moves with an eerie grace, untouched by the fire that rages around it. As it approaches, the air around it seems to warp and ripple, the intense heat bending light itself. The flames seem to dance around it, converging into a swirling vortex of fire and ash. Just as the figure nears, a hand grabs mine, pulling me back to the harsh reality of the firestorm. I turn to see Lani, her face obscured by the visor of her protective gear. For a moment, in the surreal, smoky haze, she looks alien, a creature from another world in her fire-resistant suit. But it's her grip, firm and determined, that grounds me, convincing me she's very much human. "We can't stay here." Her voice cuts through the roaring fire. The ground under our feet shifts unpredictably, the earth cracked and uneven from the intense heat. We dodge falling branches and leap over smoldering debris, the air thick with the acrid smell of burning wood and ash. As we navigate through the inferno, trying to stay ahead of the ever-advancing flames, a haunting sound pierces through the chaos. At first it seems like another trick of the fire, the howl of the wind perhaps, or the creaking of burning tree. But while we pause, panting and disoriented, the sound crystallizes into something unmistakably human. Voices, distant and ghostly, floating through the smoke. The voices aren't speaking in English, nor in the familiar pidgin that's like second nature to us. Instead, they're in Hawaiian, the language of our ancestors, a language we've heard in school, in cultural celebrations, but never fully mastered. Despite our limited understanding, the tone of desperation is unmistakable, their cries for help. The voices, haunting and persistent, draw us like a siren's call. We exchange a glance, the same thought mirrored in our eyes. We can't ignore this. We push forward towards the voices, time being our greatest enemy. The ground slopes sharply, leading to a steep ravine that cuts through the park like a scar. It's a natural barrier, one that the fire hasn't yet crossed, but the flames are close, hungrily licking at its edges. Lani and I cautiously approach the precipice of the ravine. The voices grow louder, clearer. They seem to be emanating from the depths of the ravine itself, rising up through the billowing smoke like a chorus of lost souls. Among the ghostly voices, Lani catches a word that sends a shiver down our spines. "Kapu," she whispers, her voice tinged with fear. The ancient Hawaiian term for forbidden or sacred reverberates through the fiery landscape, a warning unheeded by us until now. We stand frozen, the realization hitting us hard. We're on sacred ground, a place where the living are not meant to tread. The air grows heavy, charged with an otherworldly energy, as if the very spirits of the land are rising in anger against our intrusion. Suddenly, from the glow of molten rock and the charred remains of the forest, 3 figures emerge. At first they appear as mere distortions in the heated air, like mirages born of the fire. But as they draw closer, their forms become horrifyingly clear. The largest of the 3 lava walkers strides forward with a dominating presence. Its body is a living tapestry of molten rock and fire. Flames lick across its surface, outlining muscles and limbs. Its eyes, glowing like coals, fix on us with an intensity that chills me to the core. Flanking the larger figure are two smaller ones, each moving with an eerie, fluid grace. Their childlike size gives me an unsettling feeling. The flames that envelop them cast their features in a grotesque, ever-changing dance of light and shadow. As they draw nearer, the terrifying truth dawns on us. These creatures, these lava walkers, are the missing family we've been searching for. The largest figure, the one that resembles the mother, extends a hand towards us. Her fingers, made of flowing lava and flickering flames, reach out in a gesture that's heartbreakingly human. Her eyes, glowing embers in a face of liquid rock, convey a mother's desperation. Even with our fire-resistant gear, we can feel our skin prickling painfully from the proximity. We back away slowly, our eyes locked on the haunting figures before us. An invisible barrier of heat pushes us back step by step. In our haste, we don't realize how close we are to the precipice. Lani stumbles, her foot slipping on the loose, ashy soil. For a heart-stopping moment, she teeters on the edge, her arms flailing for balance. Acting on instinct, I lunge forward, grabbing her firmly around the waist. With a desperate heave, I pull her back from the brink, both of us falling to the ground in a heap. I frantically search for any route of escape. Then, my eyes catch sight of a large, charred tree, its base weakened by the fire and the intense heat of the volcanic activity. I motion to Lani, pointing towards the tree. "Lani, the tree," I shout over the roar of the flames. Understanding flashes in her eyes, and without another word, we spring into action. I grab my chainsaw, a tool I carry for creating fire breaks. As I rev up the chainsaw, the roar of its motor cuts through the crackling of the flames, a man-made growl against nature's fury. The chainsaw bites into the charred bark, sending a shower of embers into the air. I work quickly, the blade slicing through the weakened wood, the smell of burnt timber filling my nostrils. As the tree begins to give way, Lani braces herself against the trunk, using all her strength to guide it in the right direction. With a final, forceful push, the tree begins to topple. We both jump back as it crashes down, creating a makeshift bridge across the ravine. We scramble across the fallen tree, the wood creaking and groaning under our weight. We barely make it to the other side of the ravine when a heart-wrenching scene unfolds behind us. The earth, weakened by the intense heat and the ravages of the fire, can no longer support Lava Walker's weight. The mother, still reaching out towards us, and her two smaller companions are swallowed by the collapsing ground. They tumble into the abyss of the ravine, their forms dissolving into the molten rock below. A profound sadness grips me as I watch them disappear. Lani grabs my arm, pulling me away from the edge. "Koa, we have to keep moving," she urges, her voice thick with emotion. We move swiftly from the edge of the ravine, the heat of the inferno still pressing against our backs. Lani leads the way, her familiarity with the park's topography guiding us toward an elevated position, a rocky outcrop that offers a vantage point. As soon as we reach relative safety, still shaken by the harrowing sight of the lava walkers being swallowed by the earth, I pull out my radio, my hands still trembling from the intensity of what we just witnessed. I know our immediate priority is to prevent whatever is back there from spreading. Dace, this is Saito. We need immediate air support on these coordinates. I relay the exact location of the ravine, emphasizing the necessity of a rapid response. The response from dispatch is swift and professional. Copy that, Saito. Air support is en route. Hang tight and stay safe. Over. Pulling off our masks, we take in deep, desperate gulps of the fresher air. Now available. The sensation of breathing without the constraints of our gear is profoundly relieving. As we catch our breath, a faint, distant hum grows progressively louder. I look up, straining my eyes against the smoke-filled sky. The sound intensifies, a deep, resonating thrum that vibrates through the air. I catch sight of the unmistakable silhouette of a C-30, its powerful engines cutting through the chaos of the wildfire. As the aircraft unleashes its payload onto the ravine, a cascade of fire-retardant billows down in a massive cloud, blanketing the area in a surreal pink hue. The inferno below begins to subside under the deluge, the flames dampened by the torrent of chemicals. Lani turns to me, her eyes reflecting a myriad of emotions. My hand reaches out, gently touching her cheek, smudged with soot and sweat. "You okay?" I ask. Without saying a word, she pulls me close, her lips meeting mine in a passionate kiss. It's as if she's always wanted to do this. In the face of the unpredictable and fleeting nature of life, she seizes the opportunity, knowing it might never come again. As quickly as Lani kisses me, she pulls back, a flush of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. She starts to apologize, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Koa, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Before she can finish, I close the distance between us, returning her affections with equal fervor. It's a kiss filled with all the unsaid things, the emotions that have been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. The world around us seems to pause, the crackling of the fire and the distant sounds of the emergency response fading into the background. It's just Lani and me, surrounded by the wake of our ordeal. In the aftermath of the wildfire, the efforts of the emergency response teams gradually bring the blaze under control. The raging flames that once threatened to consume everything in their path are reduced to smoldering ashes and charred remnants. The missing Jenkins family, Sarah, Tyler, and Ethan, are officially listed as tragic victims of the fire. Within the ranks of the rangers and the emergency teams, whispers about the lava walkers circulate in hushed tones. But in the official reports, there is no mention of the mysterious figures we encountered. As the weeks pass and the charred landscape gradually begins its slow recovery, life for Lani and I gradually returns to familiar rhythms, patrolling the trails, guiding tours, and educating visitors about the park's unique ecosystem and geological features. Though life has seemingly returned to its regular patterns, there's an undeniable shift between Lani and me that's impossible to ignore. In the quiet moments when our glances meet, there are hints of something profound and unspoken that's blossomed between us. Despite everything that unfolded, I would never discourage anyone from visiting this majestic place. Kilauea, with her raw and untamed beauty, holds a special kind of magic that everyone should witness at least once in their lifetime. So, to those who wish to venture into Hawaii volcanoes, I offer these words of advice: respect the land and heed its warnings. And if during your journey you ever hear the forests whispering in Hawaiian, I'm sorry, your wife didn't make it. On the bright side, neither did your child. I jogged down the office steps, unable to take the elevator. It was taking too damn long, and I didn't have time to spare. My shoes squeaked against the clean tiles, and I dogged the bodies of my colleagues. I barely got the chance to glance at Jackson. He wasn't having it, and grabbed my wrist right as I passed his cubicle. "Where do you think you're going?" he grinned. "She's in labor," I muttered, smiling ear to ear. His eyes widened. He mirrored my expression and stood from his chair. His grip on my wrist turned borderline painful, but the adrenaline rush alone helped me ignore it. "Well, why the hell are you still here? They'll handle your work. Go to your damn wife and kid." He pulled me into a quick but firm hug, patting my back twice as a gesture of good luck. And just like that, I was off, out onto the parking lot, into my piece of shit Corolla. The highway, of course, had bumper-to-bumper traffic, and the heavy rain didn't do much to help. My phone would alternate between ringing and buzzing from messages from friends and calls from family. Appeared everyone, and their mother knew about the good news, and it brought an odd sense of pride. Tori, my wife's sister, was the most persistent party, called to ask where I was, as well as gave me updates on how Tiffany was holding up. She wasn't at all far from the delivery room. I could hear the mother of my child screaming her lum out in the background. And sure, my heartbeat was in my throat for obvious reasons, but I couldn't focus of anything but the road and Troy's voice. "So, if you don't get your ass here in the next 10 minutes, you'll officially be a deadbeat from day one," she warned. "Very funny, how is she?" I asked, honking my horn at some moron who tried to swerve lanes. Tori paused, as if listening for my wife's cries of agony, then responded with, "She's been better, but I'm sure she's fine. He'll try to make it as soon as possible." "Yes, you will. Deadbeat clock is ticking. Tick-tock." "Tori, I'm kidding, Jesus. Just get here as soon as you can. They'll be waiting for you." I smiled at her wording. I'm about to meet my baby girl. "We'll see you soon, Tori." I hung up. I'm not a particularly religious person, but I was mumbling a prayer to myself, barely remembering the words, stumbled over syllables, jumbled phrases. But I prayed, "If you're listening, please protect my wife and child. Pregnancy is dangerous enough. Tiffany definitely has complications with hers. It technically was never supposed to happen for medical reasons. She's perfectly fertile, so am I. Her womb was healthy. I had a high sperm count. Everything pointed towards us having a child sooner rather than later. Then a new strand of COVID hit, with its own rules and expectations. No masks, nothing like that. It didn't even infect most of the population. Those it did infect, for some reason they were advised not to try for children. That's it. We strongly advise you not to have biological children. I was infected, and we abstained for 5 good years because we feared for the safety of our child. Our baby's bells came first. Our happiness was an afterthought. We were willing to wait. However, eventually we decided it's been long enough. Other variants of the virus are long gone from our bodies by now. This one can't be that different. We got tested, we were clear, and we tried for a baby. It happened quickly, as you can imagine, and Tiffany was pregnant, ready to face months of doctor's visits and strange cravings. Very strange cravings. Making my drive to the hospital, stepping out and running to the front doors, finding Tori and hugging her in celebration. All the sweeter. We stood and paced in silence, as more of our family started showing up. My uncle and Aunt Mary and Kyle, with a few of my cousins. My granddad also turned up. All of them had this palpable buoyancy, as if struggling to stay in place, and I was no better. Tiffany's screams had died down. She was quiet, and that gave me a bit of relief. Selfish, I know, but it does hurt to hear someone you love so deeply in pain. But at any point by then, they'd call us in to meet the newest member of our family. Well, they certainly called us, and I listened. I stood with a vacant stare, tuning out more screams. Only this time, from the outside. This time I could see the faces around me distort in agony, feel hands grab at my arms and pry me every which way, as if wanting an explanation from me. A husk stood next to trembling bodies. I never moved. I never spoke, because there was nothing to say. It wasn't a sense of grief or anything of the sort, because grief implies you'll move on to the next day with the knowledge of loss. As far as I was concerned, the world ended the moment those words left the doctor's mouth. They explained the complications. They explained what went wrong. They didn't get a chance to actually hammer in the final nail. We did everything we could. By this point, their wailing had completely drowned her out. My eyes did follow the figure under the white sheet. White as snow. My Tiffany would sing out of tune. She would leave dishes in the sink that would drive me insane. Ironically, she hated a messy space. Would watch terrible 80s movies and talk about cheesy romance books she was obsessed with. She had 2 left feet and a wild mind. She had ambition, grit, the most stubborn woman I'd ever known. All of that doesn't begin to describe my Tiffany. And she was simply reduced to a body on a gurney. A number to tally. A tragic statistic. A failure in modern medicine. She doesn't move. She doesn't speak. She gets rolled away. A pile of bones and flesh. A mind that I adored, dormant, and a heart that I inhabited, still, resting, beatless. All family does ask to see her. When she's stored, they can't allow her to rot. So will you be able to spare a moment? I heard a question, because questions still matter. Life is still happening around me. It hasn't just stopped. No, questions still matter, and I needed to answer. Of course, I rasped. I'm sure I look psychotic, unjustly stoic. Truth is, my body wouldn't react. I'm not proud of it, but I followed the steps of the medical professional through the hospital, the cries and confusion of my family fading down the hall. They hate me for sure. Irresponsible, aren't I? Maybe Tiffany didn't even want a child. Maybe she did it just for my sake. Maybe she'd still be eerie. She'd still be here if I never asked us to take that step. I stepped into the elevator. Stood by the doctor. I'm sorry again, she muttered. I nodded. I'm still supposed to walk out of this hospital. After whatever she needs me for. I have to face the pavement, the clouds, the cars in the highway. I have to make dinner, wash dishes, clean our home, sleep, wake up, eat, breathe. I still have to exist after her. I have to plan her funeral, write words befitting a goodbye, watch her get lowered, her ravenous soul long gone, her body trapped in a wooden coffin. I have to watch them throw dirt over the wood, stop myself from jumping in with her. Sir? This way, please. Not sure how long she was standing there. but the elevator had long opened. A hallway, untouched by sorrow, revealed to me. A distant light flickers right at the corner. "I'm sorry," I muttered, stepping out. "I understand," she assured, continuing to lead me. Our steps are loud against the tiles, and my phone vibrates every few seconds. It seems everyone and their mother knew what had happened. She stopped right in front of a door. No different from the rest. Plainly white, regular silver doorknob. "Just through here," she said. I nodded. Her steps once again sounded, retreading the way we came. I touched the doorknob and heard one last phrase. "I really am sorry. I'm sure she meant a lot to you," she comforted. I nodded. She was holding back more. Her eyes were glossed with the weight of witnessing what she did, and she knew there was nothing anyone could say. She walked back into the elevator. I entered. It smelt of pine. Probably the large wooden desk at the far end of the office. An engraving too elaborate to even ponder was facing me. It looked as if it was worth more than my entire life. The carpet, the curtains, the backdrop, overlooking the city, the man himself. Everything in that room looked more valuable than my life, including him. He didn't pay me immediate attention, still typing away on his laptop, and I wasn't in the spirits to announce myself. "Oh, hello there. How rude of me. Have a seat. Have a seat," he chirped, adjusting his tie and straightening the papers on his mammoth of a desk. I wandered over, took a seat on one of his leather seats, and tried to introduce myself. I thought of doing so, and that alone was daunting. He cleared his throat, offering a hand over his desk. I took it, shook it, and acknowledged his awkward grin. He had a head of silver hair, although didn't look much older than me. Distinctly blue eyes, an angular nose, and strong chin. He chuckled. Sure you're not in the best of spirits." "Well, that's what I'm here for," he declared, right before calming his tone and donning a serious disposition. The type you'd wear during a distant relative's wake. You never knew them, but you understand there's a performance of grief that's expected of you. Nothing could heal you, I'm sure. Nothing, I say, might bring her back. Tiffany, she was special, very, very special, and deserved a longer life than what she was given. And I couldn't swallow the feeling that he was patting his own back over his ability to seem kind. "What am I doing here?" is what I decided to ask. He sighed. Was I supposed to participate in congratulating his behavior? "We let you down. We can expect you to walk out with this level of dissatisfaction," he stated. Dissatisfaction, as if she was a faulty product. "What number would it take to make this challenging time easier?" he asked. I didn't immediately react, and in the passing seconds most people would get uncomfortable. He was starting to seem impatient, strumming his fingers on the desk, fiddling with the keys of his laptop. "I'm an inconvenience." "We never asked for money," I said. I was under the impression we owed the hospital. "You do," he claimed, "but, not anymore. It's part of our apology. I've never heard of a hospital paying families of patients after a death." I mumbled. "Not unless they did something." "I assure you, we did our jobs as servants of the public and medical professionals," he interrupted. "It would be hard for you to understand at this exact moment. I'm aware." "What are you talking about?" I asked, sharp-toned and out of patience. "What are you trying to say? I just lost my wife, God damn it. I have a family to keep together, and right now, they're all waiting for me. So tell me why I'm here. Plainly, clearly." He sighed once again. "If you insist," he muttered. "Mr. Rhodes, your wife didn't make it. But you're aware of this. She died because of your child. It's unimaginable to lose them both. But it's what had to be done." I suck in a shallow breath. "Had to be done? You were advised to not have children, yes?" I nod. "Well, there you go. You had one order. You might have adopted. Even a sperm donor would have worked in your particular situation. After all, Tiffany wasn't infected. But no, you insisted on the one thing medical professionals insisted against," he rambled. "We were tested. The order wasn't. We advise you not to have biological children until you're clear. The order was, we advise you not to have biological children and period," he insisted. My eyes dropped to my lap, and I made a conscious effort at steadying my breaths. "I don't understand. The new strand of COVID, Mr. Jones. It isn't a friend of reproduction. And all we asked of you was a bit of time to fully understand it. Most people listened. What makes you lot special, he complained. I listened. We took your child. By extension, we killed your wife, he states. It's blunt and moved on from immediately, because what was in her womb, whatever it was a biohazard. At least, and at most, what people would assume is God's punishment for human depravity. We couldn't let it out, yet her body worked as a type of containment for your child. Took. Of course that's all you heard, he sighs. You're a father. I'd expect nothing less. Yes, Mr. Rhodes, technically your child is alive. Where's my baby girl? You'll see her, he insisted. You will. First we have matters to sort out, things you must understand.
Only that church did. Only that church did. And understanding anything, I stood, and it took him off guard.
But he quickly regained his composure. I want my daughter. You won't get her regardless. But you'll see her, only if you sit back down and listen, he ordered. Completely cold. His veneer of empathy no longer served him. And it ate at my pride, but I sat, watching him push a piece of paper towards me, on with a pen. Non-disclosure agreement. What I tell you stays here. But do you want to see your daughter or not? I griped the pen and scribbled my signature on the dotted line, sliding it back to him. Here, now say your piece and take me to my daughter. He nonchalantly filed the document in a folder. It became the latest copy in a mountain of them. My stomach churned at the thought of me being just another loose end in whatever they're doing in this institution. How my family was just an unfortunate part of their jobs. Did you have a name in mind, he asked, storing the folder in his drawer. Why does that matter, I bet? She's not dead. There was no point in giving her a name when you thought you were going to have to bury her soon. Now, you know she's still alive. A second chance. Name her, he said, typing something on his laptop. Bella, I whispered, barely believing the first name that came to mind. Bella Rhodes. Why? He asked, clearly curious. It was my mother's name. We weren't close, but why am I telling you this? Just say what I need to know, I insisted. He turned his laptop around, showed me the screen, and he spoke. But my attention doesn't falter from the glow of the video I'm witnessing. It had a friendly, almost salesman tone of voice. Diagrams of human anatomy in an art style reminiscent of 10th grade biology. So, you slipped up and had offspring, despite your many warnings against it. It happens more often than you'd think. Believe me, the voice said, stock images of happy families flashing across the screen. Cooking in the kitchen, walks in the park. I'm not here to judge you over your blatant disregard over your children's well-being. I'm also not here to tell you that this is most definitely your fault. I'm here to tell you the results of your decision. So sit back, grab a snack, and pay attention. My eyes shifted to the man across from me. He wasn't even paying attention, sorting out his own paperwork. So I looked back to the screen, now showing the human anatomy. For the last few years, we as scientists have been scratching our heads over COVID-19, a virus that seemingly mutated about of nowhere, but ultimately we did find a way to counteract it. Vaccinate it. And as nature tends to do, it evolved. Mutated again. This strand is much more picky with its victims. We do not know what characteristics make you the most likely to be vulnerable. You just are. Now, what exactly happens to your body? Well, we don't know. The virus seems to hide itself pretty well, blending into your juices as if it was always there, like your brown eyes or curly hair. It spreads like an STD, and its ultimate effects are more or less not too far from one too, depending on how you look at it. I swallow my building discomfort of the imagery. A pregnant woman with something inside her. That wasn't a baby. It stays dormant. But something about your hormones during pregnancy agitate the little bug, and it latches on to the most vulnerable cells in the body. The hosts, yes, but more so the fetuses. It digs into every bit of their DNA and remodels the entire thing. It would be remarkable if it, didn't create monsters. Here's some neat examples. I didn't get the chance to close my eyes. Videos flashing in quick succession, and after I saw the first, a baby, normal in most ways, but its face, its mouth, is lined with rows and rows of jagged teeth. Its lips are swollen, curling back into its whole face. Red and throbbing as the tongue sort of wanders its immediate area,
That very tongue is deformed by bumps and is as long as an adult hand, scraping its face as if having a mind of its own. The poor thing cries in a drawl, a painful rasp.
After seeing that, there was no point in covering my eyes for the rest, and there was plenty more.
I'm sure you've seen enough. So, our job here, it's quite simple really.
We do our best to convince the infected to not carry on their now permanently tainted genes. We could just ban them from reproducing, but human rights and all that. Besides, we outlawed abortion years ago. Didn't think that would bite us in the ass, huh? There's not much we can do without causing a panic, except warn everyone who gains the new strain of COVID and capture the offspring of those who don't listen. I felt hot tears in my eyes, and the screen was a glowing blur at this point. My breaths were ragged, clawing at my throat. So, best of luck to you, and I am sorry if your bundle of joy ended up with a thirst for human blood. Sucks, I know. Thankfully, we'll deal with the consequences of your completely avoidable actions for you. Have a great day. So think of it this way, he muttered, closing the laptop. Your wife didn't make it. On the bright side, neither did your child. I want to see her, I whispered. He looked at me with a visible confusion. Huh? That's a first. Usually parents take their check and go running for the hills after the video. I want to see my baby, I repeated. Why? I wasn't sure. Maybe because I'd lost Tiffany, and Bella was the last piece of her that was still alive. As twisted as my baby girl may be, I want to see her once. You realize it's not the bodily quirks that are the problem. It's that these fetuses are actively bloodthirsty. He deadpans. Please just take me to my daughter, I'd plead. And for a moment I swore there was a glimmer of actual empathy in those cold blue eyes of his. Then he stood. Fine then. Follow me, is all he said, walking around his desk, then out of his office. I followed. Down the hall, into the elevator. He didn't press a button. He pressed a certain sequence of them. 191 and the elevator reacted, closing its doors and going down. I sniffled softly, keeping my tears to myself. I guess I'd only had so long until it really started to dawn on me that Tiffany wasn't coming back. He stood, not acknowledging my quiet whimpers, and I appreciated it. I was too weak to be mad. I was too broken to try and attack the man that took everything from me, and he pitied me enough to not watch as I sobbed. We descend past the ground floor, past the basement, the numbers on the panel no longer glowing. The ride took about 5 minutes before we reached our floor, and I tried not to think about how deep we were underground. The doors opened and unveiled an entirely normal-looking hallway of the hospital. It looked like any other, with the added exception of no windows to be seen. I suggest you don't go exploring, he advised, shrugging off his formal suit. He hung it on a rack right next to the elevator. He then grabbed a white lab coat, throwing it on over his shirt. We won't be held responsible for what happens to you, he warned, nodding towards the lab coats. I took the hint and put one on myself. It was a thick material, oddly so. I suppose it helped with the cold air down there. I followed him down the hall, and was wondering why we ignored every door we passed, until we reached the wall. Plain, not a single remarkable thing about it, and we stood in silence. I almost dared to ask what we were looking at. Why were we just standing there? Until the wall slid away without much of a sound, revealing that the hallway continues behind it, an entirely different feeling to the one we'd just passed. A harsh blue light shone from the fluorescents. In place of white walls and plain doors, there were glass displays. And as we walked, my eyes did sprint from cage to cage. I mean, that's what these things were. Cells would be for humans. These creatures were of another species. Tiny bodies, completely twisted and deformed, but not at all defenseless. First cage on my left. Oh, the fetus was crawling, its face engraved with a deep sadness. No frown. It would need a mouth to frown, and it had no such body part. Blank skin below its nose, which were just 2 holes on its face. I wanted to ask what's so bad about that one. Surely it could still live a somewhat normal life. It couldn't. It did have a mouth on its back, not visible until it opens, ripping apart its little body. Of course, jaws, and a horrifyingly long tongue that quickly pounded against the glass, aimed at my throat. I flinched and kept walking. Second cage on my right. It sits on the cold concrete of its cage, its body faced away from me, its head fully following me as I walked past. One of its legs, just one, is stretched to the length of a python, its knee towering high above the rest of its body, stiff, and its toenails scratching at the floor. It had tunnel vision on me, and I wondered how on earth it would kill me, then decided I didn't want to know. You could always turn back, he offered, nonchalant to the reality around us. Come here to see my daughter, I insisted. Why? To traumatize yourself? Do you really want to see what we ripped out of your poor wife? What you put in her? He chastised. She would want me to see our daughter, I whispered. She loved you, yes? She did. We made a few sharp turns, revealing more fetuses, different states of hunger and decay, different ways to rip off your flesh, all over their bodies. Then she wouldn't want something like that for you. She would never wish years of sleepless nights on you. Eternal solitude from the weight of nobody understanding. No therapist, no family, no friend, no lover. Nobody will understand how it feels to see your child in this state. Tiffany wouldn't wish that upon you, he reasoned, and I had no response worthy of countering it. So I just continued to walk behind him. Suit yourself, he sighed, and enjoy the person you are now, he muttered, as we reached a door. One of the only ones down here, because you'll leave here a different man. Why is Bella in this room? I asked. Because we're still assessing just how dangerous she is. What containment might be necessary for her, if she's harmless enough for this floor, or if we need to place her on the lower levels. Lower levels. A lot of you couldn't keep it in your damn pants, he said under his breath. No, do not interrupt the doctors. You're here to see your daughter. Nothing more, is the last thing he said, opening the door. We stepped in, and I immediately felt my fists clench, adrenaline once again flooding my veins at the sight. The room was coated in streaks of red, bodies laid in awkward positions, a gurney tipped over at the center of the carnage. I accepted it damn quickly. That Bella is not my innocent little girl. She's something else entirely, and I needed to live for my wife's family, for what's left of mine. They couldn't lose us both in one day. Not sure what was going through his head, but I was deciding what we were up against. She's obviously free. My eyes go from one corpse to the next. How one had its head in its own hands propped up against the wall. It was on purpose. She's smart. The next few corpses were laid on their back, their innards completely scattered around them in red ropes, with almost the exact same technique. She can kill multiple people at once, and she efficient. A body in the corner had a long red streak trailing from the roof right down to it, head also severed. He was picked up, injured mid-air, and slid down. She's strong, really strong, from everything around us. She's sadistic and merciless, clearly enjoys the hunt. Stay calm, he muttered, walking to a cabinet, swinging it open, a black metal safe inside, which he must have had the code memorized because he opened it with ease, pulling out a gun. You're not gonna kill her, I said. He raised an eyebrow. Her or us. We can't all make it out of here. We can try. I took a step towards him. She somehow overtook the anesthesia in her system, enough to keep dozens of elephants at leap for days on end. And she woke up. Killed everyone here in a matter of minutes. We can't contain something like that, he insisted. She's my baby, I muttered. Everyone here also had children. They also deserved to live. Your child took them away from their families. Your choice did this. I'm not putting your desires over anyone else's life, he said as he inspected his weapon. Stop acting like this is our fault, I shouted, feeling my blood bubble at his relentless accusations. All we wanted was a damn family. Not this. I lost Tiffany today. Now I'm losing Bella and you're acting as if you're to blame? He interrupted, taking a step towards me. You are Mr. Rhodes. His eyes were just as certain as mine. Do you want to know something I preferred to keep from you? Something that wasn't in that damn video? He asked. I'll tell ya. This strand of the virus, it doesn't infect women. Men are its primary carriers. Ironically, men are the only ones who walk away unscathed. He seethed. You had one job. Don't get your wife pregnant. If you had just told us, you wouldn't have believed us. We've tried. We've tried every method at stopping you people from having kids. It never works. And I always end up having to explain to men like you why your wives are now gone. Always beating around the damn bush. using kid gloves like you didn't sign your wife's death warrants. You selfish bastards do this to yourselves. You are to blame. You killed Tiffany, he stated. I swallowed deeply, forcing tears to not show themselves. Now, you'll get us out of here. And if I have to kill Bella, I will. He walked past me, and I took one last glance at the room. How the joy of my life somehow did it. And I thought about how I was about to watch that joy be ripped from me all over again. Gunshot, several of them in quick succession. And my legs carried me to the chaos without another thought. The piece of metal slid across the tiles, right to my feet. The walls were already marked with red, and the man was hanging off of the ground, held up by an arm with its body hidden just around the corner, its flesh hanging off its thin bone, dangling with his movements in meaty shreds. Its skin, or what was left of it, was red and irritated, but certainly it had a chilling amount of strength. His legs weakly tried to sway. His hand pried at the grip around his torso. Long fingers completely wrapped around him, the fingertips slowly sinking into his chest with an ease that made my own stomach squirm. He screamed, louder and louder, and the hand kept him in place, as if wanting me to observe his torture. God, shoot it, please, he begged, desperately pounding at the fingers with his fist, and his assaults went unnoticed. I trembled, grabbing the gun at my feet, and my quivering dulled my aim. Its fingertips sunk deeper and slowly started parting, as if working with dough. His chest, the inside, slowly showed. Blood dripped on his expensive suit, and on the floor, I could see intestines squirming together, taking up odd spaces, and hanging out like sausage links, and I wondered how he was still conscious. Kill it! Kill me! Do something! For the love of Christ! He screamed, and so I did. I fired several bullets, squeezed the trigger out of pure fear, and had no perception of my own aim. A few hit the wall, a few hit the tiles, a few hit the fingers, a few must have hit him, and then, click, click, the gun was out of ammo. And as if on card, the hand released its grip and he fell to the ground with his butchered chest, taking his last ragged breaths. I crept towards him, and I could see his exposed, pink, plump lungs take their last few pumps of air. I knelt there for a few minutes, not out of guilt. He killed Tiffany, more so understanding that he'll probably meet a similar fate, and giving myself a moment or two to accept that inevitably, I stood back up and walked the way we came, knowing full well that Bella was somewhere that way, probably blocking the exit. Still, I walked to her. Tiffany died by the hands of strangers. I'd die by the hands of my little girl. I could hear a chuckle, the type you'd expect while flying an aeroplane over your child's head, calling them the cutest little thing to ever exist. Quiet coughs that you'd hear if you wrapped them in a blanket, swaying near a fire, ignoring the storm outside that's upset them. Bella sounded precious, and as I made my last turn, Bella looked precious. A beautifully dark skin tone, almost matching her mother's. She blinked at me, and I returned the action. She was sat on the cold floor. She wasn't clothed yet. She must have been cold, but showed no signs of it. She glanced at the other cages. She glanced at me and tilted her head, made a sound that any baby would make in an attempt to speak. I walked to her, catching glimpses of the cages I passed, and how the little prisoners hid most of their more frightening features, how they crawled and sat and wailed as if no different from any other child on the surface. I broke my heart that I knew this wasn't true. A few steps from Bella, I look into the eyes of the last love of my life. "Hey, baby girl," I whispered, not knowing what death wish had taken over me. I knelt, I reached for her, and she let me cradle her in my arms. She was covered in blood, but her skin was soft to the touch. She gently kicked and gripped in my grasp. I was crying. She was completely calm, and that irony wasn't lost on me. I couldn't take her. I knew that. But for a moment, for a flicker in her honey brown eyes, I saw Tiffany holding her all the same. I saw her upset with me over being stuck in traffic. Her and I bargaining over diaper duty. I'd take up even more of the housework so she could focus on raising our happiness. And I'd take over when the little one wears her out. Our Bella would be a handful. I knew it. I'd never get the chance to have it, complain about it, to miss it once she was grown and gone. I let out a breath and lowered her to the cold floor. "Bella," I can't take you. You're dangerous, I whispered. And it's not your fault, baby. It's mine. She blinked at me. You'll be just fine. You? I noticed the streak of blood leading right to her. You don't need me. Not to protect you, that's for sure. She couldn't understand me. She chuckled just out of being entertained by Daddy talking in a funny voice. A trembling, weak voice. I have to look out for your cousins. For everyone in our family. I can't let you hurt them. I know it's selfish, baby. I know, so please forgive me. I didn't have any reason to think she'd let me live. That she'd allow me to walk to that elevator, watch the doors close as her form faltered, a few fingertips peeking from her little lips. I rode the elevator up for 5 long minutes, watching the buttons eventually started to glow until I reached the ground floor. I wandered the hospital right out of the doors, into the parking lot where the rain had started to pour. I sat in traffic, watched as some morons switched lanes and caused more chaos. I parked in my front yard, walked into my home. I slept. I woke. I woke. I cleaned the house, took out the trash, trimmed the lawn, and went to work. I made funeral arrangements. I watched Tiffany's body get lowered. I didn't jump in. I read the cheesy books on Tiffany's nightstand. I watched the horrible 80s movies I loved once. I talked with colleagues, finished spreadsheet after spreadsheet. I answered questions, because questions still mattered. Life went on. The world went on. So I had to do the same. Somehow, I had to be okay. The best beans. The best part of volunteering at a food pantry is trick-or-treating. I joined up to help people, sure, but I, and everyone else on the planet, would be lying if they said the old Halloween tradition isn't some of the most fun you can have with your mask on. Of course we weren't going out for candy that night, but canned and non-perishable food, still the nostalgia pop from donning a grocery store costume and getting my strongest pillowcase is better than some better drugs. We had paired out in groups of 4 and divided the city into groups of neighborhoods, then set out in vans and pickups to collect for the needy from those who otherwise probably wouldn't have given. I had the fortune of getting paired with other out-of-town students from the college, which meant no remember when live theater from older townies and hopefully a couple new friendships. When we arrived in what was called Little Mexico by locals, the neighborhood kids were out in force. I felt like an idiot for a brief second each time we waited behind a packs of grade schoolers in my Assassin's Creed cosplay, catching judging looks from parents who clearly knew we were too old to be doing this. It all melted away once we explained our purpose to the tenant and got a collection of "oh wow" or "that's so sweet" in mostly broken English. A cheap ego boost for the fresh-faced 20-year-old behind that NCO hood. It might have been one of our last houses that night. I can remember the sky being dark and my arms getting tired from carrying 2 sacks of tin cans for block after block. The people's generosity punishing our good deeds thoroughly. The gentleman who answered that door understood English perfectly, which was a relief. He motioned for us to wait, then returned with 1 can for each of us, placing them gently at the top of our bags before waving goodbye. On the label was the design for Great Values baked beans, but with new text. Above the picture of beans was Arial font reading, "Best Beans." Then in a little circle off to the top left was something that looked like the bastard child of Cyrillic and Kanji. I'm as monolingual as it gets, but I've played with the language settings on computers enough to recognize just about any script, and this certainly wasn't one I'd seen before. Paired with the somehow ominous sounding "Best Beans," and this should have set off alarm bells, but a white liberal arts student wouldn't be caught dead doing something culturally insensitive, so it went into the bag, then onto the shelves. I figured that the neighborhood being named Little Mexico didn't mean the man had to be Mexican. He could have been from anywhere, and so could his language. My next shift at the pantry was a week or 2 later. When you work anywhere for more than a month, you start to build relationships with the regulars, which is how I met Frankie. Frankie was 15, homeless, and if he had a family, they clearly weren't in the picture. I had caught him tuning the common room TV to professional wrestling once, and we instantly hit off talking favorite moves and wrestlers until that topic wore thin, and I discovered Frankie was a bit of a foodie. As much of a foodie as someone reliant on free meals can be, that is. In an effort to see him smile more often, I would tuck away the more interesting donations so Frankie could get the pick of the exotic litter. That meant Frankie ate a lot of noodle, every variety of spicy ramen, instant pad thai and pre-dried flavor packet had kept that kid together in one way or another. so he was always excited when my stash had something actually exotic. Frankie, check this out. I don't even know what language it's in. The way he examined the can like it could break or spring open any minute was one of the many eccentricities that endeared Frankie to all of us. Gotta say, didn't know other cultures had baked beans. It really seems like an American delicacy. That thought hadn't occurred to me, that the food I ate regularly may not have been commonplace around the globe. Yeah, well, the innovative allure of chunky brown water is just too much to pass up. Frankie smiled, tucked the can away in his messenger bag with the rest of his haul, then headed out. He'll try anything once. The remaining 3 cans of best beans went onto the shelf, but then curiosity got the best of me. Worst case scenario, I get a day off classes with a tummy ache. Best case scenario, I enjoy some top shelf baked beans. I got back to my apartment and realized I didn't have a can opener, so I tortured the thing with my pocket knife until finally the surprisingly durable shell cracked. You'll try to explain the smell in the most communicative terms, but understand that the odor which slowly rose into my nostrils was entirely unique. The industrial scent of burning rubber mixed with a hint of that almost not there cucumber smell forged an unholy union in my kitchen and dissuaded me from taste testing. I tossed the thing in an outside dumpster and chuckled at the thought of discussing this with Frankie the next shift. 2 idiots who thought what was in hindsight clearly some kind of gag gift not meant for consumption looked tasty. Frankie wasn't at the pantry my next shift though, or the one after that. I was nervous going into the third, but Frankie really had eaten it and gotten sick or worse. But as I was closing up, there he was slumped against the side of the building in an upright ball. Frankie? Frankie, where you been, man? Are you okay? At a distance of 2 yards, I could still hear him panting slowly, carefully. He turned his head slowly to meet my gaze, and his eyes were those of a rabbit in a bush, praying the wolf wouldn't find it. Shh. Harsh, but still quiet as his head turned back. I stood still and looked out at the parking lot, where only my beat-up Sudan could stalk him. A minute passed in the cool air. Frankie? Frankie, are you on something, man? Nothing. Frankie? Frankie? Damn it, if you're in a bad way, let me help. I marched over and grabbed him by the shoulder, to which he reacted like I punched him, rolling to his back and tightening his legs to his chest. He raised one arm to protect his face. The other's hand covered his eyes. Shit, man. Can't you see it? See what? He looked back to the parking lot, then to me, appearing different. The wolf was gone. Nothing. I haven't been sleeping a lot lately, and I'm just stressed. I freaked out a little. I'm sorry. Frankie rose and dusted his back. Is it too late to get some food? Technically we're closed, but it's just me right now. Pinky, promise you won't rob me and you can have whatever you want. When Frankie had made his selection, I tore open a pack of Chips Ahoy for us to share while we toked. First about wrestling, then his efforts to find work. Finally, I decided to pry. What's got you so stressed? He sat for a minute, chewing and chewing, then without swallowing. I just don't feel like myself right now. I feel on edge. Did something happen at the other shelter? He was not the type to let you in. You had to knock down the door to find out anything about Frankie. When he didn't reply, I continued. Was it something not at the shelter? That was stupid. That had to annoy him. We enjoyed our cookies a bit longer before I inquired again. Did you end up eating those beans? Frankie shot to attention. Yeah, best beans my ass. Tasted like plastic but without the decency to be chewable. I laughed. It probably was plastic, Frank. I think that old man was messing with us. I was still laughing, then choking on bits of cookie. Didn't the smell tip you off? Frankie threw his hands up. Now you tell me. You know I'm the type to get hungry looking at fermenting fish. Bad smells may as well be fresh-baked cookies. Now we were both laughing and minutes rolled past. But we were still laughing because Frankie ate the stinky bean. Suddenly though, Frankie stopped and flicked my arm. Stop that, man. Oh, come on. You're literally laughing with me. No, stop the other thing. Now was my turn to get serious. What other thing, Frank? What you're doing with your ears. Stop that shit. He threw a slap on my arm. Frankie, I'm not doing anything with my ears. Are you sure you're okay, man? At an instant, Frankie grabbed at something behind my ear and pulled at air. He had cupped his hands carefully around nothing. Only he could see, and examined it carefully as though it would break or spring into something at any moment. From my perspective, it looked like he mimed dropping something before catching it as it bounced. Then he looked up and I had to have the worst look on my face. He eked out, "Sorry, Things have just been weird for me lately. I didn't need to speak this time because my glare was the key to finally open his mind. He told me all about how he began seeing things, but that it was probably from being in and out of shelters so long. Even the sober start to tweak out from stress eventually. Then slowly rose and lurched out with the invisible item in tow. I swear he nibbled it. I slept awful that night. Even in my dreams, my vision wouldn't stop spinning. On the way to school, I ran over a raccoon and didn't even register it for half a mile. Lunch was when things got really bad, and I kept repeating simple tasks, like lifting the barren fork to my mouth without realizing I was doing it. When I couldn't focus on class, I just excused myself and drove back home. Coyotes were feasting on the raccoon now. I spent 2 days in a fugue, not going to class, work, or the pantry, just laying on my couch and trying to keep down soda crackers with ginger ale until finally the fever broke and I picked up off the couch and plugged in my phone. After getting a start on laundry, my device pinged with texts asking where I was, if I was okay, and then finally, what caught my attention, had I seen Frankie? Shelters hadn't seen him in weeks, and the pantry folks were worried something had happened. I organized some ferns to comb his usual haunts, to no success. We stayed searching until 1 a.m. every night, though, until the news broke. Water treatment workers found a body floating in one of their pools. Frankie. He was flayed open. I didn't want to know anything more. A life like this, governed by tragedy out of his control. Being cut so short is a tragedy all too common for homeless youth. The strangest part is that no one knows how Frankie got into the pool, because while the security cameras were working, they all showed every measure seemingly letting walk through. It was like he could see hidden workarounds to every obstacle. That's what the cops said. I called out of work, put school on the back burner, and the pantry didn't schedule me. I just sat at my apartment and stared out the window to the courtyard. Coyotes nipped at nothing and crows circled until they dropped out of the sky. Some of my neighbors have been pretending to hide in broad daylight, carefully strutting across the open yard and stopping suddenly at random intervals. One started sleeping on dead crows. Another just opens his window to look around and whisper to the air. That's when a funny connection hit me. Crows and coyotes are scavengers. They eat roadkill sometimes. Raccoons eat trash. Frankie died in the water supply. We all drink water. This all started after he ate those beans. I'd been subsisting off my bottled water, but that ran out 2 days ago. I've begun seeing a lot of weird shapes around the apartment and other people. I got to say, some of them look pretty tasty. There, this is Finn. A group of people broke into my house last night, but nothing was stolen. You can have everything. I don't think I'm coming home. You're telling me they didn't steal anything? Nothing at all. The man's bloodshot eyes had begun to glaze over. Flashing red and blue lights illuminated his face, cleaving through the thick darkness of my secluded front lawn. Maybe I should have lied. Well, no. I mean, I haven't exactly taken a full inventory of my stuff yet, but it doesn't seem like anything is missing. The cop cleared his throat, cutting me off. A loud, phlegm-steeped crackle emanated from the depths of his tree-trunk-sized throat. Without taking a breath, he smoothly transitioned the sputtering noise into a series of follow-up questions. Let me make sure I'm getting this right, buddy. You woke to the sound of burglars just moving your furniture around. That's it? I'm supposed to believe that a roving band of renegade interior decorators broke into... what? Open up the space a bit. Adjust the feng shui. He looked over his shoulder and gave his partner an impish grin. The other officer, an older man with rows of cigarette-stained teeth, responded to his impromptu stand-up routine with a raspy croak, which was either a chuckle or a wheeze. I assumed chuckle, but he wasn't smiling, so it was hard to say for certain. My chest began to fill with all too familiar heat. I forced a smile, fists clenched tightly at my sides. Let's try this one more time, I thought. I can speak to their intent, sir. And that's not what I said. I didn't hear them move the furniture. I woke up to the sound of music playing downstairs. As I snuck over to the landing, I saw a flash, followed by a whirring noise. It startled me, so I stepped back, and the floorboards creaked. The cop turned comic appeared to drop the act. His smile fell away, and he started to jot something down on his notepad as I recounted the experience. I was relieved to be taken seriously. The rising inferno in my chest cooled, but didn't completely abate. It went from Mount Vesuvius moments before volcanic eruption to an overcooked microwave dinner, molten contents bubbling up against the plastic packaging. I guess they heard the creak, because the music abruptly stopped. Then multiple sets of feet shuffled through the living room. By the time I got to the banister and looked over, though, they had vanished. That's when I noticed all the furniture had been rearranged. I think they left through the back door, because I found it unlocked. Must have forgotten to secure the damn thing. He said, staring at the notepad, scratching his chin and mulling it over. After a few seconds, he lifted the notepad up to his partner, who responded with an affirmative nod. What do you think? Has this happened to anyone else closer to town? I asked, impatient to learn what he'd written. Oh, no, probably not, he snorted. I have an important question, though. His impish grin returned. Even the older cop's previously stoic lips couldn't help but twist into a tiny smirk. What song was it? Seething anger clawed at the back of my eyeballs. My Dark Star by the London Suede, I replied automatically. I don't know that one, said the younger cop, clearly holding back a bout of uproarious laughter. In that moment, the worst part wasn't actually the utter disinterest and dismissal. It was that, like the cop, I'd never listened to that song before last night. Didn't know any other tracks by the London Suede, either. So, for the life of me, I couldn't understand how those words spilled from my lips. I'd Googled the track once they left. It was what I heard. Anyway, the cop then presented his notepad, tapping his pen against the paper. These were my guesses. In scribbled ink, it read, "Bad Romance," "The Macarena." It took restraint not to slap the notepad out of his hand. God, I wanted to, but it would have been counterproductive to add assaulting a lawman to my already long list of pending felonies. Criminality was how I landed myself out here in podunk corn country to begin with. Nearly divorced and with a savings account emptier than church pews on December. So, I settled for screaming a few questions of my own at the younger of the two men. For example, I inquired about the safety of this backcountry town's tap water, speculating that high Hermie levels must have irreparably damaged his brain as a child. Then I asked if his wife had suffered a similar fate. I figured there were good odds that she also drank from the tap, given that she was likely his sister. Those weren't the exact words I yelled as those Neanderthals trudged back to their cruiser, but you get the idea. No matter how much bottom shelf whiskey I drank, sleep would not come. Once dawn broke, I gave up, rolled out of bed, and drunkenly stumbled downstairs to heave my furniture to its previous location. I didn't necessarily need to move it all. My plan was to only be in that two-story fixer-upper long enough to perform some renovations and make it marketable. In the meantime, I wasn't expecting company, and it wasn't like the intruders left my furnishings in an awkward pile at the center of the room. They shifted everything around, but it all remained usable. I couldn't stand the sight of it, though. It was a reminder that I plain didn't understand why anyone would break in to play music and move some furniture around. So, with some proverbial gas in the tank, 2 stale bagels, a cup of black coffee, additional whiskey, I got back to work. The quicker I returned to renovating, the quicker I could sell this godforsaken property. I purchased it way below market value, so I was poised to make a pretty penny off of it. Blair would eat her words. She'd see that I could maintain our standard of living, even without my lucrative corporate position and the even more lucrative insider trading. It wouldn't be the same, but Thomas and her would be comfortable. After all, I was a man. I am a man. I deserved a family. More than that, I couldn't endure the thought of being even more alone. If that was even possible, how did they do all this without waking me up? I contemplated, struggling to haul my cheap leather sofa across the room, its legs audibly digging into walnut hardwood flooring. I dropped the sectional with a gasp as a sharp pain detonated in my low back. The sofa slammed against the floor, and the sound of that collision reverberated through the relatively empty house. Silence dripped back incrementally, although the barbershop quartet of herniated vertebral discs stacked together in my lumbar spine continued to sing and howl. Close enough, I said out loud, panting between the words. My heart pounded and my head throbbed. Sobriety was tightening its skeletal hand around my neck. I was overdue for a dose of spirits to ward off that looming specter. I left the couch in the center of the cavernous room, positioned diagonally with its seats towards a massive gallery of windows present on the front of the house, rather than facing the TV. A coffee table and a love seat ended up sequestered tightly into the corner opposite the stairs next to the hallway that led to the back door. Honestly, the arrangement looked much more insane after I tried to fix it, because I stopped halfway through. I figured I could make another attempt after a drink. So, the sweet lure of ethanol drew my feet forward, and that's when I noticed it. a small, unassuming square of plastic, peeking out from under the couch. I don't know exactly where it came from. Perhaps it was hidden under something initially, or maybe I dislodged it from a sofa crease as I moved it. Honestly, I tried to walk past it with looking, but the combination of dread and curiosity is a potent mixture, powerful enough to even quiet my simmering alcohol withdrawal. With one hand bracing the small of my aching back, the other picked it up and flipped it over. It was a Polaroid. The sofa was centered in the frame, and it was the dead of night. When I arrived 2 weeks ago, I had the movers place the sofa against the wall. That wasn't where it was in the picture. I could tell because the moon was visible through the massive windows above the group of people sitting on it. At least, I think it was a group of people. I mean, the silhouettes were undoubtedly people-shaped, but I couldn't see any of their details. The picture wasn't poorly taken or blurry. It was well lit too. I could appreciate the subtle ridges in the furniture's wooden armrests, as well as a splotchy wine stain present on the upholstery. The flash perfectly illuminated everything except for them. Their frames were just dark and jagged, like they had been scratched out with a pencil from within the picture. It was hard to tell where one form ended and another began. They overlapped, their torsos and arms congealing with each other. Taken together, they looked like an oversized accordion, comprised of many segmented, human-looking shadows. Not only that, but there was something intensely unnerving about the proportions of the picture. The sofa appeared significantly larger. I counted the heads. I recounted them, because I didn't believe the number I came up with. 34. My hands trembled. A bout of nausea growled in my stomach. Then, out of nowhere, a violent, searing pain exploded over the tips of my fingers, where they were making contact with the Polaroid. It felt similar to a burn, but that wasn't exactly it. More like the stinging sensation of putting an ungloved hand into a mound of snow. The Polaroid fell out of my grasp. As it drifted towards the floor, I heard something coming from the hallway that led to the house's back door. A distant melody that I had only heard once before last night, and yet I knew it by heart. But she will come from India with a love in her eyes. That's a, "Oh, how my dark star will rise. Oh, how my dark star. Oh, how my dark star. Oh, how my dark star will rise." Terror left me frozen. I listened without moving an inch. By the time it ended, I was drenched with sweat, my skin coated in a layer of icy brine. After a brief pause, the song just started over again. My head became filled with visions. A group of teenagers right outside the back door, maybe the same ones who had broken in last night, playing the song and laughing under their breaths. Maybe the cop was there too, having been in on the entire scheme. Perhaps Blair hired them to harass me. The custody hearing was only weeks away. The more unstable I was, the more likely she'd get full custody of Thomas. They were all out to prove I was a pathetic, wasted mess. Of course, that was all paranoid nonsense, and none of that accounted for the Polaroid. I stomped around the couch, past the other furniture, down the narrow hallway, and wildly swung the door open. Who the fuck up? My scream quickly collapsed. I stood on the edge of the first of 3 rickety steps that led into the backyard, scanning for the source of the song. A few birds cawed and rustled in the pine trees that circled the house's perimeter, no doubt startled by my tantrum. Otherwise, nature was still, and no one was there. My fury dissipated. Logic found its way back to me. Why was I expecting anyone to be there? The nearest house is a half-mile away. Blair wouldn't hire anyone to torment me in such an astoundingly peculiar way, either. 1, she wasn't creative enough, and 2, she wasn't truly malicious. My former affluence was the foundation of our marriage. I knew that ahead of time. Once it was gone, of course she wanted out. Before I could spiral into the black pits of self-loathing, a familiar hideaway, my ears perked. The song was still playing. It sounded closer now, but it wasn't coming from outside the house like I'd thought. Laundry room, bathroom, guest room, laundry room, bathroom, guest room. No matter how much I racked my brain, nothing was coming to mind. You see, there were 3 rooms that split off from the hallway that led to the backyard. From the perspective of the back door, the laundry room and the bathroom were on the left, and the guest room was on the right, directly across the laundry room. Maybe I'm just forgetting the layout. I haven't been here that long. After all, I remembered there being 3 rooms, but I was looking at 4 doors, and the muffled sounds of my dark star were coming from the room I couldn't remember. My palm lingered on the doorknob. Despite multiple commands, my hand wouldn't obey. I couldn't overcome my fear. Eventually, though, I found a mantra that did the trick. 3 little words that have bedeviled humanity since its inception. A universal fuel, having ignited the smallest of brutalities to the most pervasive, wide-reaching atrocities over our shared history. Be a man. Be a man. Be a man. My hand twisted, and I pushed the door open. The room was tiny, no more than 200 square feet by my estimation. Barren, too. There was nothing inside except flaking yellow wallpaper and the unmistakable odor of mold, damp and earthy, but I could still hear my dark star, clearer than ever before. The sound was rough and crackling, like it was being played from vinyl that was littered with innumerable scratches. I tiptoed inside. It was difficult to pinpoint precisely where the song was coming from. So, I put an ear to each wall and listened. When I placed my head on the wall farthest from the door, I knew I was getting close. The tone was sharper. The lyrics were crisp and punctuated. I could practically feel the plaster vibrate along with the bass. I stepped back to fully examine the wall, trying to and failing to comprehend the phenomena. There was barely any hollow space behind it. Not enough to fit a sound system or a record player, that's for certain. If I took a sledgehammer to the plaster, I would just create a hole looking out into the backyard. I stared at the decaying wallpaper, dumbfounded. I dragged my eyes over the crumbling surface again and again, but no epiphany came. All the while, the song kept looping. On what must have been the 20th re-examination, my gaze finally hooked into something new. There was a faint sliver of darkness that ran the length of the wall, from ceiling to floor, next to the corner of the room, a crack of sorts. I cautiously walked towards it. Every step closer seemed to make the crack expand. Once my eyes were nearly touching it, the crevice had stretched from the width of a sheet of paper to that of a shot glass. Somehow I wasn't fearful. My time in that false room had a dreamlike quality to it, surreal to the point where it disarmed me. Like it all wasn't real, so I could wake up at any moment, safe and sound. The edges of the fissure rippled, vibrating like a plucked guitar string. Soon after, I felt light tapping on the top of my boots. I tilted my head down. Essentially, the wall coughed up a dozen more Polaroids. They settled harmlessly at my feet. The ones that landed picture up were nearly identical to one I discovered in the living room, with small exceptions. Less scratched out people, a different couch, more stars visible through the windows in the background, to name a few examples. The overturned Polaroids had dates written on them in red Sharpie, the earliest of which being September of 9. When I shifted my head back to the crevice, it found it had expanded further. I stared into the black maw as my dark star faded out once again, and I could see something. There were hundreds of Polaroids wedged deeper within the wall, and the gap had grown nearly big enough for me to fit my head through. Long-belated panic stampeded over my skin, each nerve buzzing with savage thunder. I turned and bolted, flinging the door shut behind me. Racing through the narrow hallway, I peered over my shoulder, concerned that I was being chased. Nothing was in pursuit, but there had been a change. Now, there were only 3 total doors: laundry room, bathroom, guest room. I have a hard time recalling the following handful of hours. It's all a haze. I know I considered leaving. I remember sobbing. I very much remember drinking. I tried to call Blair, but when I heard Thomas' voice pick up the line, I immediately hung up, mind-shatteringly embarrassed. I didn't call the police, for obvious reasons. Well, the order in which that all happened remains a bit of a mystery to me. But in the end, I suppose it doesn't really matter. Here's the bottom line. I drank enough to pass out. When the stupor abated and my eyes lurched open, I found myself on a sofa, propped upright, not angled in the middle of the room where I had left mine either. This one had its back to the windows. The scene I awoke to was more perplexing than it was hellish. The living room was absolutely saturated with objects I didn't recognize. Knickknacks, framed photos, watercolor paintings, ornamented mirrors. A citrusy aroma wafted through the air, floral but acidic. There were the sounds of lively chatter around me, but as I sat up and glanced around, I didn't see anyone. Not a soul. I was about to stand up, but I heard the click of a record player needle connecting with vinyl. The sharp noise somehow rooted me to the fabric. My dark star began playing in the background. When I turned forward, there he was, materialized from God knows where. He appeared older than me by a decade or so, maybe in his late 50s. The man sported a cheap, ill-fitting blue checkered suit jacket, with black chinos. His face held a warm smile and a pair of those New Year's Eve novelty glasses, blue eyes peeking through the circles of the 2 number 9s in. The figure stared at me, lifted a finger to the corner of his mouth, and waited. I knew what he wanted. Without thinking, I obliged. I smiled too. He nodded, brought a camera up to his eye, and snapped a Polaroid. The flash of light was blinding. For a few seconds, all I could see was white. Screams erupted around me, erasing the pleasant racket of a party. Then I heard the roaring crackle of a fire. Slowly, my whiteout faded. The clamor of death quieted in tandem. My surroundings returned to normal too. No more knickknacks or family photos. Just a vacant, depressing, unrenovated home. The man was also gone, but something replaced him. Like the scratched-out people. It was human-shaped, but it had much more definition. A 7-foot-tall, thickly built stick figure looming motionless in front of me. If there was a person under there, I couldn't tell. If it had skin, I couldn't see it. All I could appreciate were the Polaroids. Thousands of nearly identical images seemed to form its body. They jutted out of the entity at chaotic-looking angles. Reptilian scales that had become progressively overcrowded, each one now fighting to maintain a tenuous connection to the flesh hidden somewhere underneath. It didn't have fingers. Instead, the plastic squares formed a kind of rudimentary claw. 2/3 down the arms, its upper extremities bifurcated into a pair of saucer-shaped, plate-sized digits. I watched as the right arm curved towards its belly. The motion was rigid and mechanical, and it was accompanied by the squeaking of plastic rubbing against plastic. It grasped a single picture at the tip of its claw, assumably the one that had just been taken, the one that included me. When it got close, a cluster of photographs on its torso began to rumble and shake. Seconds later, a long black tongue slithered out between the cramped folds. The tongue writhed over the new picture, manically licking it until it was covered in gray-yellow saliva. Then, the tongue receded back into its abdomen, like an earthworm into the soil. Once it had vanished, the entity creaked its right arm at the elbow, so it could reach its chest, pushing the Polaroid against its sternum. The claw pulled back, and it stuck. Another, for the collection. An icy grip clamped down on my wrist. I turned my head. There was a scratched-out, colorless hand over mine. My eyes traced the appendage up to its origin, but they didn't need to. I already knew what I was about to see. The sofa seemed to stretch on for miles. Countless scratched-out heads turned to face me, creating a wave down the line. Everyone wanted to the newcomer, even the oldest shadows at the very, very end. I did not feel terror. I experienced a medley of distinct sensations, but none of them were negative. Peace, comfort, fulfillment, safety, appreciation, love. Ever since the Polaroid snapped, I've been smiling. I can't stop. Blair, I hope you see this. The door is fully open for me now, and I may not return. You can have everything. The house, the money, the cars. You can keep Thomas too. I don't need you. I don't need him. I don't need any of it. I found an unconditional love. I hope someday you find one too. If you ever need to find me, well, you know where to go, but I'll tell you when to go. 11:58 p.m. every night. If you decide to come out here, bring Thomas. Gregor would love to meet him. That's it for tonight's stories, but the nightmares never end. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. Got a scary experience of your own? Share it in the comments. I just might feature it in a future video. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, some things are scarier than they seem in the dark.